Evening, folks.
Oh, wow.
This is going to be great because we've got a new PA system. It's wired, and I think it's going to work really, really well. So I know you folks watching at home are pleased, and certainly those in the audience. The council is thrilled to finally get this done. So thank you, Kip, and everybody that's responsible for getting that done. Thanks very much. Okay. Let's start with the roll call. Suzanne?
Thank you. Mayor Levy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Carr.
Here.
Councilmember Case.
Here.
Councilmember LeVar.
Here.
Councilmember Nacarado.
Here.
Councilmember Sonier.
Here.
And Councilmember Sawyer.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. If you'll all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to start with agenda item 3A, and I'm not exactly sure where you want me. There, probably.
Uh-oh.
You want to hold something? Okay. Well, welcome you all to being here tonight. This next presentation is really special because we're going to honor somebody that really has done as much as anybody in our community for her own family, for our own community, Woodland Park, and for our country. And so, not exactly sure where to start. Karen just gave me a long list of things that Carol Harvey has accomplished. And I'll try to be brief, and she'll get to say a few things, and maybe council would like to say a few things too, because this is special. And it's really an honor and a privilege for all of us to recognize Carol Harvey for everything she's done. Like I said, not only for our community, but bigger picture for our country. So correct me if I'm wrong, Carol, 42 years? 42 years. That's more than a lot of the folks in the audience have lived. That she dedicated. But you still look great. The point is 42 years serving our country. Which in itself is kind of an anomaly. You know, there's a lot of us, not myself included, there's a number of folks that have served 20, 25, 30 years, whatever the case may be. I think everybody will recognize the fact that 42 is special. And so we thank you for that to start. You know, next we talk about our community, and I think these guys moved here in about 2005. Is that about right? And Carol jumped right in. So she's got her other job, jumped right into more public service, if you will. And so planning commission and sat on any number of committees, and just day after day after day giving back to our community. Honestly, I've been around for just maybe 25 or 30 years. I don't know anybody that can measure up to the commitment to our community that Carol has exhibited. On a personal note, I was, it's ironic that Phil's here today, I was selected to be the mayor in a crazy process almost 6 years ago, and it turns out Carol was my mayor pro tem. Well, here's a guy, myself, and I won't talk about me much, but I knew nothing. I've been to 3 council meetings in my life, and then all of a sudden, I'm the mayor of Woodland Park. And I've got this tremendous group of people around me, but starting with Carol as mayor pro tem, she just kind of, I don't know, she held my hand. It's hard to describe. She was just always there when I needed her to be. She's got this great intelligence. She's got a great sense of who we are as a community, and honestly, I think everything that she did was about Woodland Park and trying to make us, right, a little bitty bit better. Never about herself, always about us. And I think if you want the ideal council person, or ideal person for that matter, that is involved in your government, she epitomizes all those things. Respectful all the time. Hard-headed some of the time.
Gary's laughing loud.
But you know what? Her intelligence and her willingness to stand up what she believed in, whether I liked it or anybody else liked it, made her a tremendous leader, I think. And leadership's uncomfortable sometimes, and we all feel that. And even though she was really my mentor, we've had our disagreements many, many times. But at the end of the day, we kind of feel like we have the same interest at the end of the day, and that's this community and the people that live here. And so, you know, it's my honor and privilege tonight to thank Carol. I should mention her husband, Gary, who I know is tremendous support, number one. And again, kind of on a personal level, I've got a chance to hang out with Gary a little bit on the golf course. And these two have a special relationship. And for me, I'm just honored to be here today and to be part of their life in a really small way. So we've got a couple of things. I'm going to start with Gary. I know you're not supposed to do this, but I'm kind of a chauvinist, I guess. Gary and I had an opportunity to play some golf, and usually when I dragged him out to the golf course, I made him play with a couple of my kids also. And so we all decided that we should do something for Gary too. So we've got a free foursome of golf for you, and you don't have to take me or my kids. You can take your friends. And so we'll get you that certificate, but that's just a small thank you for your support. Next, we've got a couple things. Carol, I think it's time for you to come on. She's got things. She's got more than I've got. So on behalf of the City of Woodland Park, we want to give you a map. You can show everybody. It's a map of the city. A lot of you have seen it a lot. And we just thought it would be a good memento for you, and a number of the staff and council have signed. And it says a grateful city, and thank you. And really, I couldn't have said it any better. So thank you very much. Can't look at those now. And you get this beautiful bouquet of flowers. Normally I stand here and when we honor somebody, right, that kind of goes above and beyond, we give them the mayor's pin. And I thought about this kind of all day. The mayor's pin is kind of like giving her a kick in the butt right now. She's done so much more for our community.
It's an old one.
But we've got an old painter's pin for you. But for an old person,
That's cool. She doesn't have
that's
that
given back to our community for forever and ever. So big round of applause for Carol Harvey.
Let's see if I can do this. I wrote down comments because I knew I'd have to stave off tears, and as Gary can tell you, I'm not a very pretty crier. And for those of you who have not met my husband, Gary, you got a twofer when you elected me because every tough decision I made was usually counseled by him. And frankly, we didn't always agree, but thankfully I also had him to be that sounding board. I've got a couple of things I want to present. I rewrote this a couple of times. I wanted it to go out on a positive note, which I have. And I want to thank you for affording me this opportunity to say goodbye to these chambers and some of the folks that I've now come to consider true friends. First, my sincere thanks to the incredible city staff. You really are on the front line. This is the first time this has worked. Like this. Front line for us, and there are really no adequate superlatives to describe what you do all day in, day out, on our behalf. And I'll continue to advocate for your recognition through fair pay. Any consideration to reduce pay or benefits is unacceptable, bottom line. And I just remind us all that you get what you pay for. Yeah. Secondly, my thanks and appreciation to all the volunteers that step in and step up to serve on the city's boards and commissions. And I'd like to call out two organizations in particular, the Planning Commission and the Downtown Development Authority. The Planning Commission, which I had the honor to serve on as a member and later as a chairman, is charged with controlling growth, promoting economic health, and improving the quality of life for all citizens. That's pretty heady stuff for appointed officials. But it's also the first line of defense and representation for individual property owners in Woodland Park. This is a very important responsibility, and I believe they've done an incredible job in honoring this task in the past and will continue to do so going forward, and I thank you. The Downtown Development Authority, or DDA, in accordance with the state statute, is charged with promoting the health, the safety, the prosperity, the security, and the general welfare of the inhabitants of their designated district. And they're charged with halting or preventing deterioration of property values or structures within the district and assisting the municipality in the development and redevelopment of the district. This is an incredible mandate. The current DDA board endeavors to accomplish this mission in every decision that it considers. The current DDA chairwoman, Mary Jo Larson, when her most recent request to be reappointed to the DDA, which, Mary Jo, I don't understand why you wanted to punish yourself anymore, but thank you for doing that. I asked her what were the DDA successes, and Mary Jo responded that every TIF agreement the board has entered into in its history has resulted in a successful business, and that continues to serve the community. That's a pretty good track record by any measure. However, the DDA is operating on the very margins of financial success. This state, in my opinion, is the result of multiple circumstances. There have been some TIF agreements that may not have provided terrific returns. There have been some decisions to purchase property at the wrong time, though perhaps not in the wrong place, and debt incursion that doesn't seem to go away. I'll admit some of this debt was probably influenced by our own city staff in the past and council inertia. But I challenge this council and then the council that will be seated in April and the DDA to make all future decisions with the goal to eliminate this debt sooner, not later, or never. Good luck, and thank you for the service to all of the DDA members, all of you. Now I've got some individual thanks from my fellow council members. Many parents and grandparents in the audience are familiar with the Little Golden Book series. My view of these library gems is that in all challenges in life, they may be answered by a lesson learned or observed in these books. So I've researched my library as well as the Barnes & Noble inventory, and I've chosen books that I believe fit the personalities of my fellow council members. And so, if we are ready.
This could be fun.
For Councilman Sawyer, I chose Peter Pan.
I love it.
And let me tell you about Peter Pan. Peter Pan's a free-spirited, mischievous young boy who can fly and never grows up, and he spends his never-ending childhood having adventures on the mythical island of Neverland. He's interacted with fairies and pirates and mermaids and occasionally ordinary children. He's become a cultural icon symbolizing youthful innocence and escapism, but I would prefer to characterize Peter as a perpetual optimist, and that's how I will always remember you, Noel. Okay, Paul, Grumpy Cat. I was surprised to find out in the Grumpy Cat Cliff Notes, if you can imagine there's such a thing, Grumpy Cat's actually a female cat. And we all know the adventures of the cat with a face only a mother could love. And while we would assume this feline had an unhappy temperament, her owner and those who met her knew she was loving, sweet, and kind, and hence my comparison to Councilman Saunier. I don't even know where to start with this one. This is for Hillary. I'm a unicorn. Hillary is a unique individual that I have grown to admire and respect because she is unique. And she's also, I would say, one of the few council members that does her homework. Do not change that no matter what happens. I really respected that. And then, I like walking back and forth here, the little red hen.
Thank you.
We know the story of the Little Red Hen. It's one of my favorite stories. I've been compared to the Little Red Hen myself. Well, the Little Red Hen, if you didn't know, she had several children, and she had found some wheat seeds, and she asked all of her farmyard animal friends to help her plant the seeds, but they all refused. At a later stage, harvesting and threshing and milling and baking the flour into bread, she again asked for help from the other animals, and they again give her no help. Finally, the hen has completed her task and asks who will help her eat the bread. Well, of course, everybody wants to eat the bread. And she said, no, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. And she and her chicks ignore the rest of the animals. But when she finished, she decided to give her friends another chance. She says the next time, she would be happy to make enough bread for herself, her chicks, and her friends if they'd help her do the work. And they all happily agree to do that. We will. And I think in that rambling description, I've described Councilman's case's power of persuasion. Now, Darwin, I didn't forget you. I don't have a golden book for you, but I do have one of two documents I think are going to be very important. I kept this pocket constitution on my desk at work for about 5 years. And then you have the other document I think is paramount to your success on the council, and that is the city charter. I also had a pocket Bible on my desk, but I know you have a moral compass, and I did not need to provide that to you. And then, Val, I diverted and decided to go with a Dr. Seuss special, Sam I Am. I have to say, my interaction with Val has always been perplexing, mainly because I couldn't believe there was a person in the world that didn't agree with everything I knew and that I believed. And I'm sure Val felt that way about me, as my husband sometimes does. But that discourse is so critical for the democratic process in our community, and I thank you so much for that. But let's talk about Sam. Well, Sam has become one of the most recognizable Seuss characters. He tries to convince a little boy to try the new dish called green eggs and ham. It's a hard sell, but ultimately he does just that. He convinces the youngster to eat and enjoy the green eggs and ham. This is a testament to Mayor Pro Tem Carr's powers of persuasion, for sure. However, I think there's a lesser-known story about Sam, and that's that he retired from the Seuss enterprise without a traditional pension or a 401k plan, and was left to exist on a meager Social Security allotment, making the purchase of green eggs and ham challenging. Well, I would opine that Sam needs to sell his current home, now assessed by the county, to be exceedingly more valuable than it was when he purchased it, which I certainly relate to, and perhaps move to a tiny home on Highway 24. Okay. And the Jolly Barnyard for the mayor. You know, I looked for, this is really odd. I was looking for Old MacDonald Had a Farm. It's actually on back order. I just have no clue why that would be the case. But the Jolly Barnyard's a pretty good story, too. But it describes a leader's role in understanding the needs of his constituents with great sensitivity. This is not an easy task. And few in my experience have ever been able to get it right. And Neil, you do. You've made an astute farmer for our council barnyard, and I mean that in the best way. Your leadership's been unmistakable, and it's appreciated by all, but most keenly by me. You, more than anyone I've known in the community, knows and understands the city, from the retailers to the school administrators to the school children to retirees to those who live here in town and those that support Woodland Park within the greater Front Range community and the state. I have a silent little prayer I say each day. Please convince Neil to run for another term as mayor. But I understand, probably better than anyone here, there is a time for all of us to redirect our energies to another focus. Neil, thank you for your service and, more importantly, for your friendship. And yes, I intend to open my home to you for your retirement party in April, if you still desire. I have just a couple of other comments. I'll try to make them as brief as possible. I know you've got quite a few cases tonight. But I wanted to say that in the context, Woodland Park is a home rule charter city. This designation provides a city or town with greater authority to regulate the local and municipal matters than is available to a statutory municipality. And most home rule municipalities have adopted the city council, city manager form of government. That is the case for Woodland Park. Under this form of government, the mayor and the council primarily address policy matters, and a professional, which we have, and are very lucky to have, professional manager implements and administers the council's policies. The manager has the power to appoint and remove all officers and employees in the administrative service of the city. The council is prohibited from directing the hiring or removal of administrative officers and employees. And I just think that's a very important point to remember. But the City Council does have incredible power as well. And running for office is a sober and humbling experience. I understand there were at least 8 individuals who applied for my vacant seat, and I'm confident all of them understood the task ahead of them. If selected, again, congrats and perhaps condolences to the newly appointed council member. But in a few months, an election will allow these same 8 citizens to pursue several vacancies on council and, unfortunately, for mayor. Perhaps others will step up for this unique chance to make this community the best that it can be. But let me remind you of the minimum eligibility requirements for running for city council. You just need to be a registered elector. You just need to be a citizen of the United States, 21 years of age, a resident in Woodland Park for at least 1 year prior to the date of the election, and not convicted of a felony, although I think that can be waived. I think it can. There are no intelligence or aptitude requirements to run for city council. There are no physical requirements or height or weight restrictions, thank goodness. And there's no requirement for political party affiliation. In fact, the requirement for nonpartisanship is mandatory and paramount for one of the most non-negotiable requirements to run, and that's a desire to serve the city and all of the residents. I believe every sitting councilman here, or council person, or council member has taken that solemn vow and that solemn responsibility very seriously. Now, I emphasize that the members on the left side of the dais serve all residents of Woodland Park. There are no electoral districts in Woodland Park. All council members serve all residents, not special interests or special groups or special constituents. In my tenure on the city's planning commission and on council, I would like to think that that's what I did. This was perhaps the most challenging aspect of my job as your councilman. It is so easy to be influenced by the loud and the profane. There's no dishonor in this reaction, but often the angry and demanding individuals who attend public hearings in these chambers may not have the entire community's welfare in mind. In fact, it may be just the opposite. For example, there were those who insisted Walmart would be a liability rather than an asset to our community because they believed such an establishment would invite the wrong type of people to Woodland Park, or that the store would completely destroy existing retail businesses. Thank goodness the sitting council at that time was able to see beyond those who were not looking at the bigger picture, namely the needs of the entire community. Walmart is here, and I believe was the financial savior of this town beginning in 2008 at the height of the so-called recession. So I'll only say at this point, when I believe certain issues and decisions presented to the Council for leadership and action were no longer viewed as community issues, but rather issues favored or disfavored by the few, I knew I could no longer serve as your councilman. However, I will forever cherish the opportunity to serve you all for the time I did. Thank you, and please enjoy the upcoming holidays. Pray for those who are serving in uniform here in Woodland Park and across the globe, and be good to each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. You will be missed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carol.
Okay, we move on to agenda item 3B, and Darren has a mill levy presentation for us.
Get this right. Thank you, Mayor. Hope you like the new microphones. They are much better.
Thank you, Carol.
Yeah. Thank you, Carol. See you. All right. So tonight, I wanted to. On Monday, I presented a presentation to City Council that outlined some of some information really related to both City Council goals and objectives, the strategic plan, elements of the impact of the mill levy, and concluded with some recommendations to City Council for the future fiscal health of the city. And what I want to do tonight is I've reduced the slides a little bit, but I want to touch on the key points tonight so that the city can better understand the dilemma the city is in and the potential options for City Council. So here's the hope I can read this from here, but this is the agenda. We'll go over the strategic plan, goals and objectives, tax structure for the city, touch on a few key points with that, talk about the fiscal environment and other considerations, touch on revenue history of Teller County, the history and comparison factors between that and CPI and Colorado construction, or the construction cost index, the impacts of the Gallagher Amendment, and then get into the fiscal health planning principles, indicators and policies, and then go over our debt service, discuss a little bit about our debt service, and make a recommendation on a 5-year budget, fiscal health goals and recommendations and questions. So first, earlier in the year, the City Council engaged in a strategic planning process starting, I believe, in April. In the conclusion of that, the City Council created a vision, mission, core values, and 5 priorities for the city. Of those 5 priorities were safety and security of our community, which is the overarching priority for the City Council, and then 4 additional priorities that focused on future economic development of the city, the financial sustainability of the city, and dealing with several policies and actions by the City Council and staff in the future that can help with that process. Focusing on infrastructure, because we have a lot of infrastructure within the city that will need to be addressed over the next 10 years, and as we grow as a community, additional requirements will be added by the federal government in terms of our MS4 permit, dealing with stormwater within the city. And then looking lastly at workforce, a lot of the communities within Teller County and the surrounding community have realized that the growing state of Colorado and the metro region within the Colorado Springs has had a significant impact on the ability for local governments to retain and recruit employees. And so this is something that City Council addressed, and I'll talk about that, but this is one of the priorities in order to maintain, offer professional development opportunities to city staff and even City Council, and also improve recruitment and retention of our staff over time. So this is the City Council goals and objectives. This is what we started off this year with. Increase the unassigned fund balance reserve year over year with a final UFBR between 20 and 25%. That was one of the goals that City Council identified early in the budget process. There was a recommendation or interest in paying down the city's $977,000 in annual debt service sooner to reduce interest costs to our local taxpayers. City Council approved Phase 3. Last year they approved Phase 1 and 2 together, and Phase 3 this year of the city's employment compensation plan, equal to 1.5% COLA and 3.2% performance pool. This is to reduce cost of turnover and retain competent and trained employees within the city of Woodland Park. I'll tell you, this is not uncommon across many local governments in the area. I won't say how much, but I know Teller County is looking at a pretty significant increase that would exceed what the city of Woodland Park is looking at. Lastly, to focus the budget revenues and expenditures on the City Council's 5 strategic priorities, and then review each expenditure which City Council did to ensure it meets these priorities. That's what the strategic plan is there for. Next, I want to touch on some key facts about our tax structure here. The last time City of Woodland Park increased the tax rate within City of Woodland Park was 28 years ago in 1991. That's something that the city can be very proud of. I'll touch on the 2020 property tax equivalent. There was a 15 to 16% increase over 2019, but we're also looking at a potential a slight reduction due to several conversions of properties within the city limits that I'll talk to you about a little bit later that are equivalent to about a $32,000 reduction in revenue. Talk about the sales tax in the city. The sales tax is 3%. There is a 1.09%, but that's for the school district. That places the city below average in terms of average sales tax for municipalities in the state, which is the average is 3.286%. The city's mill levy is 16.249, which places it 89th in the state out of 277 municipalities. Woodland Park is the second lowest in Teller County, below Victor and Green Mountain Falls in terms of a mill levy in Teller County. Cripple Creek is the lowest. That's due to gaming revenues. Each mill levy is equivalent to $123,000 for the city of Woodland Park. One piece of information that just for awareness is that with the DDA, the Downtown Development Authority, the city technically collects revenue at the amount of what would be considered 15.078 mils versus 16.249, because the $144,000 in revenue is used by the DDA to improve the vitality of our downtown. And with a 15.078 mil levy, that puts us at about 102 out of 272 cities in the state of Colorado. The state average mill levy is 13.833 for all municipalities. So as you see, we have a below average sales tax, but a slightly higher mill levy. Woodland Park's mill levy of 16.249 is technically 20.29% of all of our residents' mill levy within the city. So you have an 80.085 mill levy, and so it's about 20% of what that the city collects of that total. A couple things: fiscal environment variables that impact our ability to collect or other impacts within the city. The Gallagher Amendment passed in 1982. As a result of the Gallagher Amendment, the residential assessment rate has changed multiple times over the last 5 years, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but that is an important variable. Recent increases in other taxing authorities in the city has had an impact on perceptions in terms of the threshold of taxation within the city. Again, to go back to the city has not increased tax rates in over 28 years, but our other taxing authorities have. The library district is expected to reduce their mill levy by 1 mil in 2021. That will pay off their facility debt. They are considering potentially asking for a 1 mil increase to help pay for their maintenance of their facilities. The same issue that the city of Woodland Park faces. School district is expected to drop their mill levy by 2 to 3 mills in 2020 due to the school district mill levy stabilization process, or you can find under Senate Bill 07199. Other things, physical environment considerations, dealing with the mill levy and reduction and year-to-year revenues. Do we have the capacity to pay off our annual debt service? Do we have the capacity to provide to address our operational requirements in times of natural disaster or economic downturn? And that is related to an adequate unassigned fund balance. Do we have the capacity and revenues to keep pace with inflation, to conservatively maintain and improve existing infrastructure and provide public safety and services for our mountain community? And finally, the capacity to recruit and retain a competent and trained workforce capable of providing a safe environment for our employees, provide public safety and services for our mountain community, and mitigate potential risk and litigation to the city through that training. Revenue history of Teller County. I wanted to present this slide because I think this is an interesting occurrence in the history of our revenues for property tax, and that you'll see the anomaly of Teller County right smack dab in the middle that had zero increase between 2016 and 2017. And then you could see all the other surrounding communities or all the other surrounding counties within the region that did have an increase. I won't draw conclusions, but I think you can see that in this slide that the city of Woodland Park is catching up with the rest of our surrounding counties. What this slide shows, I'll touch on the property tax. As you can see, this is an 8-year history of a property tax within the city of Woodland Park. In 2013, we were at $1,706,009,000, and then in 2014 and 2015, we saw a fall in revenues or a fall in property tax in those years. And then you see relatively stable increase, or actually basically stasis in the property tax level between 2016 and 2017. And then in 2018, you see that the property tax didn't even achieve the same amount that we saw in 2013. No, I'm sorry. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. And then in 2019, we're seeing the same thing. 2013 actually was more in terms of revenue. If you look up at the slide, it's a little hard to see, but I'll tell you what we're trying to show here is that if you were to conduct regression analysis and put a trend line through the average increase over the last 8 years, you'll find that the city of Woodland Park has actually achieved less revenue increases over the last year than actual CPI, including 2020's increase of up to $2,003,000. And so what you see is that the city of Woodland Park is not even keeping pace with the consumer price index or the cost of living within the city as it pertains to the revenue history of our property taxes. I want to touch on a couple facts here as well. The Colorado Construction or the Cost Construction Index average in between 2014 and 2018 was 21% increase annually. I think that's important. That's the cost of buying asphalt, earthwork, concrete, and steel that funds our infrastructure within the city. That's our roads. That's our buildings and so forth. And so you can see that we're not even close to maintaining pace with, no one is really, and that's one of the biggest challenges of infrastructure within Colorado at that time. Is it supply and demand? Yes. There's a lot of communities, including Colorado Springs, that we have to compete with for the same resources that's driving cost up. It's the oligopoly that we talked about in terms of the number of the really small number of contractors that can do that work as well, who increase that cost. I want to talk about property tax revenues in 2021 are expected to fall, like I said earlier, by about $32,000 due to a couple of conversions from commercial properties to nonprofits. The severance tax will drop by 49.2% in 2020. That will be an increase or decrease that will be consistent now and into the future due to the waning oil and gas industry within Colorado. The PSAP stipends, or our dispatch stipends that we receive from the 911 authority, are projected to drop by 50% in 2021. We'll go back to that point in that our budget is somewhat inflated by these one-time revenues that look like that our budget is more than it actually is. This is a real drop that we will likely see in 2021. But those revenues could go away at any time. And then lastly, the specific ownership tax will drop by approximately $24,000 at the end of this year as well from the previous years, or from I believe from the previous year. So those are some revenue trends to keep in mind tonight. I go back to, this is the Colorado Construction Index, where I talked about it increasing 21%, a 21% average since 2014 to 2018. It has been a significant issue for nearly every community in the state of Colorado, and a lot of them in the nation. Gallagher Amendment. The Gallagher Amendment was passed in 1982. The intent is to maintain it allows for a floating residential assessment rate. And the intent was to benefit residents within Colorado and maintain a 45 residential to 55% ratio split for all other types of properties. And the only way to do that is to adjust the residential assessment rate down so that the remainder of those properties remained at that 55 split. What that does to us is it reduces the value that a mill levy can collect from residential properties. Every year it's reduced. And we'll talk about what that impact is in a second. Overview of the city's Woodland Park's property tax distribution. The city of Woodland Park is, if you remove the DDA from it, because we don't collect that revenue, it's a pass-through. That we have a 62.3% residential ratio to all other property ratios. So commercial, agricultural, industrial, vacant, natural resources, and state assessed properties is the other 37.7% within Woodland Park. The residential assessed rate is 7.15 right now, and I'll talk about how that's been reduced over the years. And the current and ongoing assessed rate for commercial and all other properties is 29%. You'll see here that oil and gas is assessed at a much larger rate, and a lot of that may be resulting in a movement of the oil and gas industry out of Colorado. So Gallagher Amendment impact. Since 2015-2016 assessment cycle or evaluation cycle, we were at 7.95. If you look back all the way to 1987, we were at 18%. So from 1987 to 2015, we dropped from 18% to 7.95. We stayed, and then we reduced it again by 0.7 or 7.2 in 2017-18, and 7.15 in 2019 and 20. The previous assessments by the Legislative Council staff estimate put the recommendation to the General Assembly at 6.85 in 2017 and 6.11 in 2019. These are still real possibilities for the residential assessment rate change, and there's a very real potential that the oil and gas industry, as it wanes, could have a significant impact to this rate in the future. So let me touch on what that impact might look like. Right now, we have a 7.15 residential assessment rate, which equates to that $2,003,000 in property tax. If the state General Assembly were to approve a residential assessment rate of 6.8 or 6.85 as they recommended in 17 and 18, that would be a reduction in revenues by around $52,000. If it were worst case scenario to be reduced to 6.11, that would be a reduction of $181,000 or 9% from its current assessment. That's the reality and like best case and worst case scenarios for the coming evaluation cycle for 2021 and 2022. Looking back at the slide I showed you, this reduction is 2.61. If you look at this trend slide, historically, we've not even been able to keep up with 2.5%. So just keep that in mind, that both of these would reduce the amount of revenue the city would have if these were to impact or be approved by the General Assembly. So getting to the City of Woodland Park's fiscal health planning, the City Council and staff, if we fail to plan for these issues, we fail our constituents and the community, because there are significant impacts, long-term impacts to this planning, and that is, neglecting deteriorating infrastructure or deferred maintenance. As it reaches what's called a degradation curve, the cost of doing that maintenance increases. So there are several roads that are at that point that we'll have to treat with full depth reclamation. If we get to it before that point, we can save hundreds, if not millions, of dollars for the city. So achieving a good balance of maintenance is incredibly important for the fiscal health of the city. Failure to properly account for multi-year obligations such as long-term contractual services or indebtedness is important. We have $977,000 in indebtedness, in debt service that we pay each year. We need to account for it and be able to meet that debt service obligation in the future. Failure to adjust for non-recurring revenues, the time-limited grants and stipends. Like I said before, we received $200,000 this year and next year for one-time stipends from the 911 authority. If those were to go away, that's $200,000 of a hole in our revenue that we would have to make up with the general fund revenue, including our mill levy. Planning helps identify future financial obligations so that the sufficient funding for those obligations can be identified. It also helps identify the long-term implications of financial decisions. Actions taken in 1 year can have implications over multiple years. So with that said, it's the City of Woodland Park's fiscal health key financial indicators and policies. The debt service coverage ratio for the city is an important indicator of long-term financial health. The municipal bond rating will help us, if it's a good municipal bond rating, will allow us to refund and pay down debt with more optimally than we could under our current municipal bond rating. So if we can improve that, we're in a better position. Our unassigned fund balance reserve helps us, in times of economic downturn and natural disaster. Having a written fund balance reservation policy helps put that in a more stable policy. Three things that the city can do, staff, with the guidance of City Council, is that we can create a capital improvement plan. We did that this year for the 410 and 420 fund. In the future, and the strategic plan states this, comprehensive capital improvement plan for the city for both facilities and fleet will be accomplished in 2020, and a long-term financial plan in 2020 as well. Touching on what are the key fiscal health, financial indicators for the city. These are some of the financial indicators that your municipal bond rating and your creditors look at when issuing credit to or debt to a city, and that includes your debt service coverage ratio. And the debt service coverage ratio puts you in a better position for better interest rates. Your financial reserves are another aspect of that, and I think we're talking about the financial reserves as our unrestricted fund balance reserve. Having larger ones gives us a buffer in case of economic downturn and natural disasters. So, debt service coverage ratio, to touch on one of the more important ability for the city to be able to cover its debt, and then the additional cash flow after expenses is an important ratio for the city to maintain. If you look at after we've done this, the DSCR, debt service coverage ratio, we identified that the city's current debt service coverage ratio for 2020 with the current budget is 1.16. In the best of times, economic times, 1.15 is the number that creditors will look at to issue credit. And the national average is between 1.2 and 1.25. And then in the worst of times, creditors will want you to have much more cash flow above and beyond your debt service to issue credit. So with that, we are just at the bottom of this, and we certainly need to look at trying to improve that cash flow and our ability to cover our debt service. Talking to our securities consultant, Jim Menier, I think that's right, Menier, sorry, I have to get that right, Jim Menier. I spoke to him about this and the potential for a mill levy reduction. His recommendation, based on the 1.16 DSCR, was that he didn't feel that it was prudent at this time until we were able to likely improve that cash flow in the future. So that was his recommendation. City of Woodland Park COPs and general obligation bond debt service. A couple things. We can't actually. We don't have prepayment rights at this point. We can't pay our bonds or COPs down until 2025. What can we do? We can earmark funding within the general fund UFBR to place against debt service when refunding, when that window opens up in 5 years. The potential savings, if you do it for 3 years, is as much as $100,000. It's much. If you do it for 5 years, it could be as much as $150,000 or $200,000. So it depends on how early we begin saving towards that to pay down that debt service. This is the debt service schedule for us. This is generally we're right here in the time frame of our debt service. This is when the window opens up for refunding, and so this in general at the bottom is the couple years that we could eliminate. The more we save, the more we can eliminate during that refunding process, and you redivert that revenue to pay down the other fund at that time. And so that's just an example of where we could find $100,000 to $200,000 in potential interest payment savings if we were to pay down the debt service early. Recommendations for 5-year fiscal health goals. In 2018, my first year here, the city increased its unrestricted fund balance, unassigned fund balance reserve to 11.8%. This year, we're going to achieve 17.1%. And as the current budget is written, we will move to 17.9% in 2020. Additional goals of reaching 19 and 20% would include that dollar amount of so if you did a 1% increase, it's generally about $93,000 to get to a 19% unassigned fund balance reserve. It would be slightly more in the following year, but that's generally the amounts. Debt service coverage ratio. How well can we place ourselves in terms of our fiscal health to potentially refund our bonds and COPs at a lower interest rate in the future? That's getting to a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio. So how do we get there? That's looking in 2021 possibly to get to $50,000 more in cash flow, and then $40,000 more in the following year in terms of cash flow at that point. I've got a minimum goal recommendation of starting in if we were to get to 20% in the unassigned fund balance reserve in 2022, starting in 2023 to 2025, we could put away as much as $280,000 to put towards debt service in 2025 and refund our bonds and reduce our COPs and reduce our interest payments. So in the last two, I'll just say that if and when we pay off our COPs and GO bonds, we open up a $977,000 revenue window to have the potential to do a meaningful mill levy reduction. And so trying to pay down that debt, reduce interest costs to the city is a noble and fiscally conservative goal to achieve for the city. At that point, when we get that revenue window, there is a lot we can do for the community in terms of reducing the mill levy. That's a big window for the future, but it's a big. I say it's a burden. It's not a burden, but it's certainly an obligation, a significant obligation for the city that we have to meet every year, that we can't forget. And then lastly, as everyone knows, the Downtown Development Authority has a certain life, and at the point that it dissolves or the dissolution of the DDA, there is also a potential to do a mill levy reduction equivalent to about 1.71. It will change over the years, But right now, if it were done in 2020, which is not the case, that's what it would look like. So with that being said, I'll touch on a few comments and recommendations. City staff recommends approving proposed 5-year plan to address the city's fiscal health. I do understand there may be some recommendations for changing that plan. City staff and the city securities consultant recommends certifying the city's mill levy at 16.249 for the fiscal year due to the debt service coverage ratio and the structure of that debt. Any reduction would need analysis on its operational impact. What services would need to be reduced or infrastructure maintenance deferred? What areas of the city's mission the city council willing to take an increased risk? And I had a good discussion with a local resident today about increasing our increased risk, and I think that's a true statement. Where is it the city council is willing to take an increased risk if they were to reduce the mill levy? Reduced expectations for our transportation safety future. I will tell you, any reduction has a long-term impact. As you know, discussing the Highway 67 improvements previously, we didn't have the funds in 1990. What year was it, Sally? 99. And so, if we didn't have it in 99, we need to address we have not made the long-term planning for those improvements, especially not Highway 24. We've not even considered the significant cost that the Highway 24 reliever route would cost the city in the future. That's not even a part of our current budget because it's such an enormous cost to both the state and the city in the future. Should we start planning for it? I think we should. We should start thinking about it if we want to make it a reality. So those two things are important for both Highway 67 safety and the future of our Highway 24 reliever route. Do we decide to defer maintenance on facilities? We have ADA compliance issues with this facility, and we also have no fire suppression systems in this building or in the Ute Pass Cultural Center, which are on the current. One of them is on the current budget for design this year and installation next year. And lastly, how do we pay off? Do we decide just to pay off the debt on a normal schedule and incur the full interest payments, or do we make a decision to reduce those interest payment costs to our local taxpayers and try to pay that debt earlier so that we can make a truly meaningful mill levy reduction in the future? I have other slides, but I'll leave it at that. Subject to your questions, that's all I have as it relates to the mill levy.
Council, I'll just say a couple things for the people that may not know relative to debt service and the $977,000. A little bit over $600,000 of that a year is relative to the pool, which almost 70% of our community voted in favor of in 2014, I believe. And then the other $300,000 are the COPs that financed Memorial Park. So it just gives people a little bit of an idea where that debt is going, or where that debt has come from, excuse me. And the other thing that really resonates with us that have sat on council is 2 years ago, our unassigned fund balance reserve was about $150,000. In 2 years, we've brought that to $2 million, and we continue to move in that direction. So for those that say, we're being whatever, we've made some great strides. And so I just want people to understand those two things. I'm sure there's other questions, and I've got a couple people that have signed up to speak, and there'll be a couple opportunities. I'm going to give everyone the opportunity to speak that wants to on this issue. There's two that have signed up for 3B and maybe 7A. 3B and 7A are the same discussion. So if you want to speak relative to the mill levy, we can do it now, or we can do it under 7A. I'm going to leave that up to Paul Neal and Tanner Coy. And then I've got Vicki Alexander, who signed up for public comment, and I'm not sure what it's in regard to. So I could ask her that right now.
I'm here.
Okay.
It has to do with government interference with public property rights.
Okay. Then we're going to call on you under agenda item number 6 on public comment on items not on the agenda. Okay? So since these two signed up for 3B, I'm going to let them speak now, and then anybody else that wants to speak relative to Darren's presentation or the mill levy, we're going to do that under 3B, and council will have that discussion under unfinished business and 7A. So that said, Paul Neal.
Paul Neal, Rusty is what I like to go by, 1470 Masters Drive, Woodland Park. I actually had a 2-page item that I was going to read off based on a telephone call that I had with Val Carr, a councilman, 2 days ago. And the telephone call was something that the only reason I am still presenting is to do 2 things: to thank and commend Val for making that telephone call to me 2 days ago. The call was very simple. Val pointed out that in the past, and you can verify it historically, he has voted against any tax increases and has tried to champion mill reductions for a long time. But that was not what he called about. What he called about was, is he right? Am I representing the citizens? He asked me, because I talk to a lot of people, because I'm interested in city council, have been since I got here. He simply asked, what are you hearing? Because I'm not sure how to vote. Am I voting what I think versus what my citizens want? And he truly didn't know. He was perplexed. So I'm here for this brief period of time to thank Val for reaching out to a citizen and simply asking, what's your opinion? Now, subsequent to yesterday, I thought about what he had asked me, and I did talk to my neighbors. Very small sample size. And what I learned is so insignificant, it's not even worth mentioning to the council. It's not. The sample size is too small. I'm not going to cloud it. But it did trigger a further conversation in which I reached out to the one area that I consider myself a subject matter expert, and that's IT. My background is IT, and I've presented that when I put in my application. So I started digging a little bit in IT, and I met with Jeremy this morning, and Jeremy gave me some information that I presented to Val that he simply asked, can you just share that with the city council and the public? That triggered another telephone call, and I have to thank another person, Darren. Darren had the wisdom when Jeremy came forward with my request for further information. He picked up the phone and called me, and we had a lengthy 30, 45-minute discussion on IT. So I'm here to say thank you and commend your staff and fellow councilmen for their due diligence in trying to represent the citizens. I wish I had something to offer in terms of how you vote. I wish you a lot of luck. Tough question. Darren, great presentation. Thank you for listening to me. I saw the bullet. And I wish you luck. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Tanner Coy.
Tanner Coy, 240 East Highway 24. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for allowing me to be here and speak.
Tanner, do us a favor so everybody
Louder?
can hear you. Please, much louder.
Sorry, the mics are working so well. I could hear everything so clearly and perfectly back there. I thought I'd better, tone it down.
Thank you.
As someone who has been so fortunate to participate in public meetings and activities with you all for some years now and become increasingly familiar with the processes and finances, etc., I have also been fortunate to learn a great number of things and how they relate to me individually, personally. And part of that is the bias that I sometimes bring with me to discussions on certain topics, and I think we all do, and that's part of how I've learned that I'm like everybody else. I see it as I participate with others, and that's just part of human nature. And this issue that has come up, this mill rate, is a very important one. I think it's a significant issue, and accordingly, a great report and presentation has been given to you, full of all sorts of information, all sorts of data, and thank you very much for that and the presentation of it. It's educational and very, very helpful to those of us in the audience trying to understand the nuances of mill levy and city finance. That said, I think it comes with a degree of bias that I can't help but recognize, and would just like to tell you that if going through this point by point, I think there are quite a number of conclusions drawn and recommendations made to you based on that information that are biased because they come from within city government and reflect the interests of government and not necessarily from the perspective, position, and the interests of citizens. And so as one of those in the audience watching, I just wanted to make that comment and hope that you weigh it accordingly. That's all. And I do have some other comments. I know that 7, was it A, is also mill related, and I have comments for each item. So I'll save those for 7A if I can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak right now on Darren's presentation? Okay, if not, we're going to move on. Suzanne, any additions, deletions, or corrections?
No, sir.
Then we'll move on to the consent calendar.
Thank you, Council, Mayor. This evening, we have 2 items before you for approval on the consent calendar. The first are a set of minutes, the first set of minutes from the November 6th special meeting, and the second set of minutes from the November 7th council meeting. And there was one correction that Councilmember Case brought to my attention, and we have corrected that. It was part of the minutes where we failed to put who made a motion, and so we've gone back into the minutes, we've corrected that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And then the other item on the consent calendar are the October 2019 Statement of Expenditures.
Thank you, Suzanne. Council?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to ask this council for something, and I would like, as we did years ago, I would like for the council to be the ones to approve expenditures in these line items for mayor and council expenses. I'd like them to be brought before the council and to be approved before they're paid. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Give us a little history. How do we get away from that?
I don't know. I just would like to, as being good stewards, it is the council's expense line items, and I just don't think it's really fair or appropriate to put those before the city manager to approve when I think they should be approved by the council.
Council?
Well, Mr. Mayor,
Please.
thank you. We don't approve any other expenses either in previous their payment. Isolating this from all the $11 million other expenditures seems a little targeted. And so I would ask that we have been doing this for the whole 4 years I've been here. I don't see what the problem is about going to isolating a single item. I mean, we could go right down that list of all kinds of other things that we don't get a pre-approval on.
These are expenses of the council, Mr. Mayor. They're not expenses to be approved by the manager. And I can imagine that the manager might be placed in an uncomfortable position, and I think that because they're expenditures of the council, that they should be the approval of the council. That's just my opinion, and I'm just asking that of the whole council.
Thanks. Noel?
Thank you.
So, prior council meeting, or actually a workshop, we were asked to line item some things in the cultural center. And so if that is fair game to line item cultural center expenses, then I see no problem with line items for council expenditures or mayor expenditures. I think that's very important. If we're spending money that we shouldn't be as a council, I think the community should know that. And so I think Councilwoman Case is justified to ask that question. And I'd like the rest of the council to consider it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd just like you to get it. Go ahead, Dar.
Are these line items in the budget currently?
Yes.
So council has already approved a budget for. So is the question really, are they within that budget?
The question is that in an expenditure, for the record, someone has to approve that expenditure with a signature. And at this time, that's being asked of the city manager. And so effectively, he's approving the payment of expenditures. And it's the council's line item, it's the council's expenses, and I would expect that if I asked for reimbursement or payment for an expense associated with the council line item, that I would have your blessing for that expense, and not the city manager's blessing. I think that puts him in an awkward position. That's just my point.
And we have not approved any budget yet.
But it would be part of the budget. But like I say, someone has to sign those expenditures for payment. And I just feel that that's an uncomfortable position for the manager.
Is there a concern for the reason you're bringing that up? I mean, is there something?
Nothing in
is there some
particular.
expenditures that a council member or someone has?
Nothing in particular. No,
nothing in
it's
particular.
just process.
Okay.
And an easy
Thank you.
process.
Yeah.
Val?
Well, once again, we're not supposed to meddle in the budget once we approve it. The city manager, city clerk have all kinds of expenditures that go across their desk, the finance director, all the directors. And so to isolate this particular budget item, which is approved, and once again, we're not supposed to be involved with the minutia of administering it, seems like we're targeting something that we're changing the rules. Otherwise, we might as well pre-approve everything, and that's just absurd. City manager is a brilliant guy. He knows how to manage these things. He knows when something doesn't pass muster, and once we start down that rabbit hole, we might as well just continue down that rabbit hole. And we aren't approving any cultural center expenses that I'm aware of. So I don't know what, I missed that meeting, I guess. I'm not sure.
Hillary?
So I see Councilwoman Case's point. I do think it is a bit of an awkward position, actually, for the city manager to be in, because if he says no to us, does it become a tit for tat? That's possible. But if we say no to each other, there's no tit for tat, so to speak. I see that point. I do think if there was an anomaly of a request, I think that the city manager should be able to bring that to us. But I don't know that exists right now. So I don't know if somebody made an anomaly for a request that you could say, guys, I don't know what to do with this. So I think that would be helpful at the very least. I never thought of it. So.
Nor have I, Dar.
Can we just ask the city manager for input? Do you feel like you're put in an awkward situation?
I'll just, my only comments is that in my previous employer, our elected officials did have a policy in place. There was a threshold. You had one, because you do have one pool, right? You have one pool of funding that you use for instance, one is training and travel. You will have another. We currently have a special projects line item for approval by City Council. That threshold allows, simple pre-approved ones, anything that wasn't approved was always somewhat contentious, and it makes it easier if there's a policy in place, I think, that it says, hey, for instance, for us, it was $500. Anything over $500 needed to come to City Council for their approval. And that's how we handled it at my previous elected body. But, I think the other option is I can always say, I don't feel comfortable approving this and defer it to City Council I can make that choice as well. It depends whether or not City Council wants an established policy, or whether you defer that, you provide that delegation to me. Yeah, it's deference to me. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Jason, from a legal perspective.
Generally speaking, when you have a policy, it has to be followed, and everybody gets to follow the rules, and there's not any argument as to favoritism or otherwise deferential treatment in that regard. What's different about this particular line item is it belongs to the council, and it's the council's decision on how it's spent. The city attorney's budget line item's approved by council. I asked for those requests, but then at that point, it's my budget to spend as I've told you I would. So that's kind of the difference in this particular budget versus other line items. My requests, I come to council, you give me authority to make the spending, but then the money doesn't get spent unless I authorize it. And this is kind of your guys' budget line item, asking the manager to authorize expenditures out of your expense line item.
Kelly, would you be comfortable with a $500 threshold? Does that make any sense to you? I don't know what this number is that we're spending. For me, I've been here almost 6 years. This is what I've spent out of the city budget, and so I know it's not much.
It's 10.5 for travel and training.
How much?
10.5 for travel and training.
For the year?
And 3,000 for meetings and mileage. Yes. I know I've spent zero.
And I will say that I've been here 6 years and I've spent zero.
I've been here about a week.
What have you spent?
Zero.
Well, the point is, we were spending $13,000 for the year.
Yeah.
Do you all, and it's approved in the budget. Do you all feel we need to approve this on a monthly basis? Let's try to get some kind of consensus, with or without a $500 threshold. It sounds like Darren's comfortable with a $500 threshold, so let me bring that to you first.
Well, I'll just clarify that when there was there was clearly identified acceptable expenses that were identified, and during the budget deliberations for City Council, they identified specifically what training they were wanting to go to that year, and that's where they went. If it deviated from that list, then they had to come and discuss it with City Council. The other piece was that there's other things in your budget other than there's City Council meals. There's what other things that the gifts, some of the other gifts that not
CML.
To a point. CML that come out of that count. So there's $500. It depends on what you want to. I mean, I'm not trying to inject it was a City Council decision at that time.
Their name tags.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's administrative
a lot of
things
little
that come out of your budget. So to put it at zero would make it difficult for us to get you your name tags, cards, and things that you need. So I wouldn't put it all the way to zero, but yeah.
I just feel that it should be approved by the council because it is our budget, it is ours to spend as a group, and I think that we need to approve those. It's not appropriate to ask the city manager to do that.
I'm
As
sorry.
Jason described.
Go ahead, Dar.
How would that process work? Would we have to actually approve it in an open meeting
That's what she's asking.
and reach
And it would be
majority
then on a reimbursement
Well,
basis.
would we just say, hey, here's the reimbursements that have been requested and
Yes.
approve those?
Yes.
I see no problem with that because it'll never happen with me.
Me either.
So I'm not worried about it.
Me either.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, there's a difference.
So
But would that take effect immediately, though, if council came to a consensus?
Well, next meeting.
Next meeting.
For next month, it would for November expenditures.
Well, I don't, there obviously is a concern here because Councilwoman Case wouldn't have brought it up. So that's kind of what I don't know why it was brought up. It's
I've been
obviously
watching it for a
concern,
while,
right?
and I
You're the budget
would
hog.
like to know, I would just like to see it.
Have we had some reimbursements requested?
Just to clarify.
Mayor, if I may, I use some of that council money. I spend some of your money for you guys tonight.
Thank you.
For instance, the beautiful flowers you bought, Carol Harvey, tonight, came out of your line item. I didn't ask you for permission because we've done it before. So I would also agree with Darren to have some, if we're going to do it, to have some kind of threshold so I still can have the ability to get the counts. I don't want to say, Dar, your name tag's $12 and have to bring it before council to approve getting him a name tag for $12.
I know who I am already.
I got you, Suzanne, and that's fine with me.
Yes, because I do spend some of that money on your
I
behalf.
understand. Yes.
So,
Thank you for that.
Welcome.
Kelly,
Yes, sir.
you brought this up. What do you?
I would agree with some threshold. I'll let staff recommend that.
Are you good with $500 threshold, Darren?
What size you had to spend, you think?
Just the only time I have a big expense is for CML.
Maybe 100.
And that comes before us here.
Once
Yeah.
a year.
Okay, that's
Yeah, we approved that anyways.
Yeah.
$200. What's your recommendation? Because I don't spend the money out of your account either.
I think $500 would be.
500 seems
$500,
reasonable
yeah.
to me.
Get consensus on $500?
Yes.
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 Okay.
Yes,
You got it. Thank you, Kelly.
thank you.
Okay, we move on. Public.
No,
Oh, I'm
Mayor,
sorry.
we haven't
Excuse
had
me.
our motion yet for
We're going
the
to approve
consent calendar.
the consent calendar. If we have a motion, please.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you. We can have discussion in a minute. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dar.
I just, if we're approving both A and B as part of
We
this,
are.
I don't feel that I should vote on November 6th. I wasn't seated at that point, so I don't know how to vote on the consent calendar in total.
Just recuse yourself.
You can
From it
recuse
all.
yourself from that, or we can ask our city attorney.
You have the legal authority to vote on it. If you, you can review the minutes, and if that was an accurate
I was here,
representation
so-
of what you recall happening that evening. But yes, you have the legal authority to do that.
So I either have to recuse myself from voting on the consent calendar in total.
No, you can
Or-
vote
You
on
can
it
vote
if you
yes,
like.
you can vote no, or you can recuse yourself.
Okay. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Suzanne?
Thank you, Mayor Levy. I just want to make sure I have the motion by Case and the second by Sawyer.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you. Carr,
Yes.
Case,
Yes.
Labar,
Yes.
Levy,
Yes.
Nacarado,
Yes.
Soinier,
Yes.
Sawyer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Dar. Thanks for your consideration. We move on to agenda item number 6, and we'll start with Vicki Alexander. And if you'll just give us your name and where you live. I don't need an exact address.
Okay.
That would be great.
Mayor, City Council, and City staff. My name is Vicki Alexander, and I live at 1360 Crestview Way in Woodland Park. I've been a resident of the Teller County area for over 22 years, and currently I moved into the home that I am now that I've had for a couple of years, but I've only become a resident of City of Woodland Park for about two months. I own Thunderbird Cabins, which is next to the high school, and it's 14 units, and I've owned that for about 4 or 5 years now. And I also own Rainbow Valley Ranch. I am not known by many people in the community, and that's because I keep to myself. I do what I need to do to keep improving my properties, and try to always do a good job. At Thunderbird Cabins, for example, the fence that you see that's between the high school and my property I built. Cost me over $20,000 to do that. But I had a problem with students coming over and just, putting trash, and they were over there smoking. I found a bunch of cigarette butts underneath a tree during a dry period, and I knew that I needed to do something in order to prevent any fire or anything else. I didn't ask for any help with any of that. I've done a lot of fire mitigation on that property as well. I'm coming to you tonight because I'm very concerned about the way that some of the decisions are being made within the city. And I've heard that other people are concerned but have been afraid to come forward. And there always has to be one person who comes forward first. And if that's me, then so be it. My main concern has to do with the fact that I believe that there are times when the planning department is making determinations when outside of their purview. I think that there's been a blurring of government or city staff's responsibilities and private property rights. I have an example of something that happened recently, actually within the last 2 days, and I've had to spend a lot of time on it, although I don't think that I should have. I'm going to be coming before you on a vacation of an easement. But what was tied to that was my driveway plan and fire mitigation. Now, I disagreed with that, and I don't think that it's any city employee's responsibility to tell me that I can't do my fire mitigation until I have my driveway plan and vacation of easement. And at the same time, the HOA, the person who runs it, actually went to the city also. So what I'm saying here is that there's this huge blurring of issues. And I think that there needs to be some discussion about what the responsibilities of the city staff are and the city council in order to help alleviate at least my concerns. I brought you 2 memos. Can I pass these out?
Susan.
So since I have to say that since that I brought this forward and I gave, some emails have gone back and forth, the fact that I want to do fire mitigation on my property is now being supported, but it was not initially. And, you have a document that was, I forget what it's called, it was done in 2017. It has to do with the Woodland Park fire. Maybe someone else knows about it. It's a document on the website that I found. And I also had to research, and I know very well about FEMA defensible space. And I had already done a lot of work out at Thunderbird. So I think that the issue needs to be addressed. Part of this also has to do with, I think there are a lot of people that are not very articulate but have concerns potentially in the city. My recommendation is that we start, I think, some more dialogue with the citizens of the city. Do you ever have town hall meetings where you ask citizens to come and talk and give their concerns in a more informal manner? I ran into problems with Teller County when I bought Rainbow Valley Ranch. And what it was is that I didn't have the knowledge to be able to confront some of the issues that the planning staff at Teller County attempted to bring forward. Now, with a lot of research, I was able to deal with that. But there are people my concern is that there's normal citizens in the city that could use some assistance rather than resistance when it comes to dealing with the city employees. And that's what I've experienced in this case, and I experienced in Teller County as well. One of the ideas I had was, and I'm going to say this wrong, ombudsman. Yes, thank you. That serves as a liaison between the city and the citizens, that has some knowledge of the different city responsibilities and can help the citizens.
Great. I appreciate your concerns. I'm going to make a couple of suggestions. First of all, people that don't come forward, it's hard for us to respond to. So you need to encourage them. There's a couple things I would recommend. Our planning director has got an open door policy, as does our city manager. And I would encourage you to possibly speak to both of them. We have a new Citizens Academy that the city manager, you're laughing for some reason.
Oh, no, I've already talked to Sally.
Okay, good.
I am not a...
No, I understand.
I'm a real upfront
I'm just
person,
trying to
so,
give you the
yeah.
best avenues.
Yes.
The city manager started a Citizens Academy last year, which we're going to continue this year, starting first of the year or so. And it's a great opportunity for you and those that you know to get a better education about the city, and that's an opportune time to ask about some of the questions that you have. But bringing it to council is the first step. We appreciate that you're here. There's a number of people on staff. Every one of these people that I know will talk to you at your convenience. And we're all trying to do the right thing for the community, and so I don't want anybody to misunderstand that. And so if you would do me a favor, and you can email me, but try some of these avenues, and you can email council obviously too. Try some of these avenues. If you don't get the kind of response that you want, we want to know about it. Is that fair?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Anybody else would like to speak, public comment on items not on the agenda this evening? Okay, if not, we'll move on to 7A and Emily Katsimpolis.
Thank you, Mayor. So tonight, this is from November 7th, this resolution number 849, Series 2019. The resolution levying general property taxes for the year of 2019 to help defray the cost of government for the city of Woodland Park, Colorado for the 2020 budget year was tabled. So it's in front of you again tonight for your consideration.
Just let everybody know what that number is.
The mill levy rate is currently 16.249 mils, which has been unchanged since 1991. So that means the preliminary assessed valuation within the city is $123,285,539. That does not include, as Darren mentioned earlier in his presentation, the DDA, Downtown Development Authority. And so the resulting property tax revenue that would be generated based on this preliminary assessed valuation and included in your 2020 budget, which is included in your packet tonight, is $2,003,267.
And that's without the correction on the properties that are changed into nonprofit. Is that correct?
Actually, so that was related to the 2019 budget year.
I see.
So this current year.
Thank you.
And that number, the $2,003,267, is for 2020.
Great. Thank you very much. Council, I think I'm going to go to public comment, and then we'll come back to us if that's okay with you. Tanner, would you like to start? I have nobody else signed up. That doesn't mean that you can't speak on this issue. So we're talking 7A and resolution number 849.
Good evening again. Tanner Coy, 240 East Highway 24. And, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for allowing me to speak again. And giving 30 minutes for my presentation. I'll try to keep it a little shorter than that. So
we know that's a joke.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So on this topic, I would like to share a few comments, beginning with, as was just mentioned, for 28 years, the City Council's authority has consistently been used to levy the maximum amount of tax on its citizens year after year that is allowed by the law and the voters. You do have the authority to levy any mill rate from 0 to 16.249. But again, for 28 years, the council's authority has certified the maximum amount allowed. That is a pedal to the metal approach to government. And I would say it's very progressive. And we have progressed. Our infrastructure has come a very far way. City services have reached excellent levels. We have a fine city, a fine government, well-equipped, well-staffed, and operating, spinning like a top. The result for citizens, after 28 years of this foot to the floor, is they're highly taxed, the city's highly leveraged in debt, and our reserve is, despite the great strides that you've mentioned, Mayor, and you're right, in the past couple of years, reserve has grown quite a bit, but it's still below the level set by council. And that's where we're at after all this time of all this taxation. It was also said that the city hasn't raised taxes in 28 years, but it has. Lodging tax was implemented. There's one example of a new tax that's been imposed in that time period. What hasn't happened is taxes going the other way. So taxes have gone up and stayed high, and there's been no relief for the taxpayers at any point. Here we are it again. I remember being in this room this time last year with you all for this same topic. And here we are again. This 2020 budget is one that I can only describe as disgraceful. Our reserve, the amount saved for reserve, is declining with each draft of the budget as it comes forward. This year, planning to put this year, 2019, the reserve grows $493,000. Next year, with more money in the budget, we only plan to save $222,000. That's a 55% decrease in money being put into reserve from this year. $271,000, or the equivalent of 2.197 mils. If that money isn't to be saved or used to prepay debt, consider returning it to the taxpayers. 2020 expenditures. Salary and benefits increasing 7.5% over 2019's budget. That's $374,630 in additional salary and benefit expense over this year, the equivalent of 3.039 mils. Planning Department budget increase 37%, $136,084, the equivalent of 1.104 mils. Finance Department increase 13%, $55,400 or 0.449 mils. City Manager expenses increasing 25%, $43,000, 0.352 mils. Overall, budgeted expenditures increasing $962,000. That's an increase over this year. That isn't the total, that's just the increase. That's equivalent to 7.804 mils. Last year, when this topic came up, some decisions were made, due deliberation and decisions that came following some important comments that I'd like to remind you of. Mr. Sawyer, quote, "I think we should take some time and put it on our goals and objectives next year." And, quote, "If sales tax goes up, that could just be a wash. And I think it should be highly looked at next year," which would be this year. Councilmember Case, quote, "The impacts need to be studied and considered by the council and by the community, and I would suggest that that time is next budget season and be part of the whole process." That's this budget season. And I fully agree that a reduction in taxation on this community is important, particularly for our businesses. Councilmember Labar, "The grant just balanced out us reducing our taxpayers' mills by 1. So I find it interesting that 105,000 is suddenly we're saying we can't. Oh my God, what's going to happen? And we don't know. I mean, we don't know. Well, we do know the pool is a problem. We know the pool's a problem, but I would just feel, and then you were interrupted, Ms. LeBar, when Mayor Levy called for the vote. Following the vote, Ms. Councilmember Case says, and I quote, "I would ask the city management to make that a priority that we discuss early on in the budget session next time so that we're prepared for this before we get this far in the process." So we took you at your word and have watched and have waited all year. And here we are again. I was at the work session a few days ago, as you know, wherein several of you said much the same things that you said last year, implying that it's too late to address the mill rate now, that this should have come up earlier in discussion, and that next year we should look at this earlier. I'd like to remind you that the statutory deadline for mill certification is December 15th. There's no rush, and that your budget doesn't have a deadline. You can roll into 2020 on 2019's budget and amend it at any point as you continue deliberations, get it to a point where it's right, and approve it. Our government, like I said, is strong. It's strong and it's growing. And part of your duty, and all of ours, is to balance that growth and strength and power with the needs of the citizens. I would propose to you that you budget for general fund revenue growth of $323,000. That's a pretty healthy increase in government revenue. Could do quite a bit with that. We could save as much money that we save as we saved this year, give increases to salary and benefits, and carry out all other necessary functions of the city. $323,000 in a new revenue by certifying 14.189 mills. If there's concern that in the future the city may need the revenue derived from 16.249 mills, consider certifying those tonight while implementing a temporary mill levy rate reduction of 2.060 mills, making the effective rate for 2020 14.189 and retaining the authority to levy the full 16.249 in future years if necessary. That would result in 2% growth in property tax and show us that you've balanced government growth with the needs of the community.
Great. Thank you,
all.
sir.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else like to speak on 7A? Council. Well?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have been, as anybody who's watched for 4 years, coming before this esteemed body and asking to lower taxes. I'm a person who would like to see lower taxes. It's just because I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm also interested in the city services. And I always do the round off number, which is 16.249 down to 0.249. This year has been a lot of contention about things, so I've reached out to a few citizens, as Mr. Neal mentioned, and a few businesses and said, you know, I represent the citizens, never mind my personal interest in my 25 to 35% increase in my property taxes. What's the real story out there? What is the feeling out there? So as Mr. Neal mentioned, he talked to me about that, and I asked him to ask other people because he has a bigger community right around him who might be interested. So what we've learned in the process of doing this budget exercise is that there's a huge property increase in Teller County and in Woodland Park, and maybe not so much in the commercial, but certainly in the residential. We've been told the number is $281,000 windfall. I call it a windfall. It's extra income that was unforeseen. There was no way to predict it before the assessor put out his numbers. The assessor's department put out the numbers. So I look at it as very simply, there's all these great presentations, there's all these numbers, there's numbers from citizens, from the staff. The bottom line is our budget currently, as it sits, has allocated every cent of that. Now my situation is that my .249 rounding off thing is not really representative of that $281,000. 2 mills is closer to what that would be, so it'd be 14 something. But we have to be realistic about what we can do up here, because each one of us has one vote. And my concern has always been about this $23,000 to $25,000 worth of debt service here. So I would ask, if the rest of the council wants to lower taxes, I'm right there with you. That would be my first option, and I would ask them after I'm done to respond to that. But my other situation is that we've been given a lot of lobbying about how the sky is falling and we're never going to survive if we have this very conservative, and granted, from a certain administration standpoint, it's great to be conservative and to, I have a little more optimism than the conservative there. But the $281,000 we've been presented, there's a slide up here that talks about the $93,000 coming forward in 2021. I would ask, if the council is not willing to lower taxes by lowering the mill rate, that they look at putting that $93,000 in 2020 budget, because the 2020 budget is where everybody's going to get killed when they get they've got the assessments already, but they don't know what that translates to. I know what it translates to. Everybody up here in the dais knows what it translates to. You've seen some numbers here. It's going to hit, and it's going to hit hard, but it's going to hit in 2020, not in 2021. So I would ask the council to consider lowering the mill rate to some extent, and we can have discussion about that. If the rest of the council doesn't want to lower taxes, then consider put this in a restricted reserve, because we can't actually pay off anything until 2025, I believe. But if we put it in a restricted reserve, absolutely restricted reserve, we can start going towards paying off that debt service. So I would ask the council to seriously consider doing one of those two things. Thank you.
Who would like to speak next? Please.
I just want to provide some clarity on, there were some percentages that were identified per cost center. I just want to clarify. I've made comments in social media to try to clarify these, and just want to make sure that the community is aware of it. The planning department did have an increase. That does include the comprehensive plan for 2020. That is a $100,000 line item for 2020. It's important that is a once every 10-year obligation for the city to address the future of our community. There's a lot of comments that have been made over the last 6 months regarding different developments, and this is one of the documents that will help address that for the future of our community. The city manager's budget did have an increase. That is due to the SBDC grant that we will receive to assist local businesses in both marketing and training to remain resilient as we move into a potential economic stabilization. We've had over 10 years of a great economy, and how do we help our local businesses become more resilient as the economy begins to slow? So the SBDC is here. In fact, I would invite anybody on Friday to come to an SBDC event that'll occur at Colorado Gear Lab. I believe it's at 2 o'clock as part of that process. The other one is the finance department. There's 2 items in there that include Cassell, a new financial system that we're bringing online.
Accounting software.
Accounting software. and also lodging revs that will help automate the compliance process for local lodging within the city. That is where that cost increase came from. I will touch on a couple things. I did point out in this slide, I just want to make sure it's clear in that if you look over the last 8 years in terms of our mill levy, one data point doesn't make a trend. I've got to hit that home. Anybody who works in academia, who understands data science, knows that a single data point never makes a trend. You've got to have at least 3, right? And so I would not even try to make a data point, try to establish a trend on the 2 years that we see there in red where we had a downturn. But over the 8-year period, we saw generally about a 2.25% increase over the 8 years total. I mean, by cumulative each year, right? I'm sorry, cumulative each year, a 2.25% increase for all 8 years individually. In terms of our property tax increase. There is an anomaly. The recent one is what is being assessed in 2020. As I stated before in this slide, there was a point in our history where there was no increase. It was a stasis in terms of property tax, which is why I believe we are seeing an increase this year, because we had stayed at nearly no increase during the years of 2016 and 2017. So just leave it at that there is, but the most important point is that are we keeping pace with the cost of doing business, cost of living within Woodland Park? And what I see here is that, our property tax over the last 8 years increased 2.25% each year, while our cost of living has increased 2.5%. That means the city is doing more with less every year, and that is the case for the last 28 years. It may not be clear because if you look at the road and miss the forest and don't see the long-term view as a city, you can make short-term decisions that have a long-term financial impact. And that's not the business we're in. We realize that we have a 24 reliever route that we have to think about. We have Highway 67 that we have to think about in the future. That was not planned. I mean, the future of that, the entire expanse of Highway 67 and all the safety requirements for that is not in our pavement management plan. Why? Because that's a CDOT responsibility. But guess what? They don't have the funds to pay for it all, so who is going to pay for it? The city will likely have to, and that's not included even in our expenditures. There's many things like that. And so I'm proud that the city has not increased either our property tax or our sales tax in the last 28 years. We've done a good job, I believe, of keeping our costs and expenditures within that allowance by our taxpayers. When we started this year, the City Council had these goals. Let's get to a 20 to 25% UFBR. There was a good reason for it, right? You asked us to look at how can we pay down our debt faster. The City Council did make a recommendation, and a lot of these comments that we've had tonight is about city staff salaries, right? The City Council made a commitment to staff to complete Phase 3 of the 3-phase compensation plan. I will tell you there are other entities within Teller County that are doing much more than this because they realize the market has increased significantly. I know people don't like paying public employees a salary, a market salary. It happens. But I'll tell you the market analysis that was done showed that we were significantly behind. We were losing police. We lost a lot of police officers during the middle of the year, and we had to really stop the bleeding, right? And so there are things that we had to do. That's what ultimately one of the impetus behind the market analysis. And I believe we're doing a lot better now as a result of the City Council's decision to address those salaries. Yes, did it take? Is it taking a portion of our budget this year, and some of this additional property tax that City Council has to approve tonight? Yes, it does. But that was a decision you made at the beginning of this. Did City Council discuss the mill levy during the year? Yes, you did. But at that time, there was a discussion that we wanted to achieve these goals, and that's why we moved forward with this these goals in mind, and use some of those revenues to ultimately identify expenditures to address elements of the strategic plan. And that's all I have to say.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add to something.
Please.
Please. One of the things that I just caution is that you can't look at these things in isolation. One thing, to take one thing out of the budget, for instance, the property tax line item, there are many implications throughout the budget that every line item in this budget impacts. For instance, yes, the planning department has a $100,000 expenditure for a comp plan. But if you look in revenues, half of that's coming in revenues. So if you net that, it's not a $100,000 increase. But accounting principles require us to account for revenues and account for expenditures separately. And so the revenues are the sources of funds that we use for the expenditure and the uses of those funds. And I have to say, being a former staff member, I have hardly ever in my lifetime of 23 years in public service at Colorado Springs and here have I seen less than a handful of employees that don't work their butts off and do a really good job and try to do the best they can for their community. There are exceptions, but they are the exceptions. And so if you want to have a quality staff, then you have to compensate them fairly. I don't know of anyone that would take a job and be paid half of what the expectation is for that job, no matter where you work. And so to have a competitive workforce that is qualified and competent to do a good job for you, the citizens of the community, they require training, they require education, they require skill sets. And it doesn't come free. And so I believe in that. I have, in years past, when we were struggling with fund balance before I joined the council, I criticized the council for offering raises to the employees because that is the single largest expense in any organization, be it private or public. And that was simply because we didn't have the ability to pay. Compensation in public funds is based on the ability to pay. And so I just don't like to see the compensation, because it's always the biggest that any employer has, being attacked for people that work and really give their all to do a good job for you all. So that's just my comments on that. And I just caution taking this budget and isolating things without taking consideration for how they're used and where they go throughout the document is dangerous. And we have discussed the mill levy, and we all recognize that it is something that we need to work towards. And I think this plan, particularly the last slide, gives us a great start. And what Mr. Carr, Councilmember Carr, suggested, maybe this year we start with a designation of that undesignated fund balance that we have worked hard over the last couple of years to really increase significantly, and designate some of that and start that saving plan for early reduction of the debt in the general fund when that call date comes in 2025. So I don't have an issue with that. I really don't. I don't mind getting started on that, because in addition to increasing our savings, debt reduction is critical. We are way in debt in the general fund, $977,000 a year. That's a huge house payment. So I don't have any problem with that. But I think it's very dangerous to reduce the mill levy, because once it's gone, it's gone. And I promise you, you all are not going to vote if we get into straps again to increase that mill levy. So I would look other places, and I sympathize. My property went up 74% in value. And it's because it didn't change between 2013 and know that assessment date is June of 18. the end of June of 18, that was the height of our market. And it is moving away from that now. So know that I'm sensitive to that, but we also are charged with being fiscally responsible for this organization. I guess I'll get off my soapbox now. But thank you.
Thank you. Dar, looks like you're next.
Thank you. I've been cramming almost for an exam here, as everyone on this dais knows. I've had mixed reports as to what is legally possible to do, whether we can certify a 16.249 mill levy and then temporarily reduce it to something less than that, and then vote as a council to increase it back up to that level. I believe city attorney advises that that's probably not the case, and I would just ask you to comment on that.
So I spoke with several other municipal attorneys who have decades more of experience in Tabor than I do. And the thing about the plain language of Tabor is you're not allowed to increase the rate from one year to the next without a vote of the people. End of story. There's also one provision in Tabor that allows for the rate change that you're discussing to be variable, but it is specifically tied to over recovery for communities that have not debruced. We debruced in 1994. There's no requirement for us to return any revenues to the community if we over recover based off of those formulas. So the only variable rate discussion that exists in Tabor is to another type of refund specific to over recovery. So the suggestion that the council can change the mill rate as long as we say it's only temporary is not something that's been legally defended before. And that would be my advice, not to go down that road, because I don't know where that ends. I can tell you that a community just west of us had been doing that for the last 10 years and has decided rather than getting into a litigation, they're going to go to the vote of the people to increase their mill levy to what it was prior, and they're paying back nearly 8 years' worth of property taxes that they over collected per the plain language of Tabor. So if you are looking to do a temporary reduction, the safest way to do that is by having a refund after that's been collected. There are costs associated with that, but that is the safest way to do it per the folks that have been doing this for 30 plus years since Tabor's inception.
I'll touch on, because I've had a chance to reach out to the treasurer's office to ask that question, and depending on what that reduction would be, there's not a cost beneficial approach to the refund. I'll tell you that a minimal cost would be about $40,000 based on the treasurer's office to do a refund to our community. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you. If I could ask a couple. If we went down a path that says we are going to basically do what the city manager has suggested here and restrict funds for a future date to early repay debt, it's my understanding that there really isn't any concrete way to do that. And we've had some discussions about council resolutions and ordinances passed by council, and what could happen with future councils, or even this council, once that's done. So I'm not sure that it doesn't constitute what we used to call the lockbox when we talked about Social Security. And I don't see any way to do that, and that's my point. Would you care to comment on?
I mean, this is something, if there was a degree, we've talked about what are there investment vehicles that would, escrow accounts or something to that effect that may give us more certainty for your city council and future city councils. There is the issue that our city attorney has brought up, is that city councils should not be making fiscal decisions.
This council cannot bind the decision of future councils, is the general premise. However, I've seen in several organizations that practice the ability to put a line item together for future debt payment and leave it alone and be responsible stewards of the money. But again, whether that's something that could be legally tied down to a point that it can't ever be changed, the reality is no, but it's certainly...
It's
But
transparent.
And we can go to, but, and I made an example in that discussion was that Teller County has made a concerted effort and has kept to that promise to fill their increase their reserves to pay off to pay cash for their new facility. And so there is that. If you as a city council make a decision to do that, it could be done through an ordinance. It can be done. And if you, I would say, I think city councils, one of the charges of city council is to be visionary, right? To have the long-term view of the community, and so that is what I'm trying to propose to city council in terms of a 5-year plan. This is just a 5-year plan. There's certainly. If you go down to the debt service, this is not a 5-year problem. This is a problem that goes out for 15 more years, and so it is a much longer-term problem. But let's look at trying to at least get to that 5-year plan to address the refunding in 2025 and try to pay down some of this debt, refund it, and get some of these interest payments off our taxpayers in the future. So.
Thank you. My last question has to do with the DDA. You talked about the exclusion of the DDA and how much of the 16.249 mil levy goes toward DDA. What would that mean in terms of increased revenues to the city as a whole if there were no DDA? And I'm not suggesting there shouldn't be.
Well, I show that at the bottom line there. As of this year, if you look at our preliminary certification, you'll see approximately $8 million in that fund. If you apply the 16.249 to that, it comes to $144,369, and so that is what the city, what DDA uses to improve the vitality of our downtown. That is theirs until the DDA is dissolved. There are things that would have to occur to make that happen, and that would be they do have debt just like the city. They do have TIF agreements. There are things that would have to occur before, or the city would just have to assume all that debt. I don't know if that's the place where we'd want to go, but once it is dissolved, that would open up a revenue stream that could be used to reduce the mill levy.
And that's the point I was trying to get to, is the revenue stream that might be generated by a decrease, say, in the overlay. Not just the mill having the DDA go away, but the district itself.
I would have to consult the attorney, but you're right. There is, I think it was 2 years ago that we increased the boundaries of the DDA.
Natural grocers.
And so,
purpose.
Yeah.
Couple times.
Again, DDA needs, just like the city, our debt service coverage ratio, they need the ability to cover their debt. But anything above and beyond that, there could be a discussion with DDA to begin to reduce their boundaries, and any savings from that could be returned to the taxpayers.
And that would have an effect on other Jackson districts as well.
Correct.
Not just the city.
Yeah, the fire district, the ambulance district, the library, all of those would have the same impact.
And that was the reason for raising the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hillary, would you like to weigh in?
Sure.
I knew you would.
So I've been under a lot of pressure to do this reduction of mill levy, and unfortunately, it's only been by one person extensively. One person threatened me, and then I had an email saying we should just take it from staff salary. And then I had a text message that just said reduce it by 2 because I know who they talk to. And it's really frustrating, right? Because I am for limited government. I will always stand by the, terms and definition that taxation is theft. But The reality is, I represent almost 9,000 people. I don't represent one who is adamant that I do this. I don't represent 4. I represent almost 9,000. The reality of why we're in the situation we're in today is because the majority of those people put us there by their votes. Had they been overwhelmingly concerned about their mill levy and demanded a reduction, we would not have an aquatic center. Memorial Park would not have been rebuilt. And Darren is new, and I'm still fairly new. And it ends up that we're paying for the sins of our fathers. And we have to figure out how to do that. And it's incredibly stressful and difficult. And Carol gave me a book and said that I research and not to ever stop doing that, and I haven't, and I don't. And I have gone beyond my city manager. I have gone to every council member, and I have gone to other citizens, and beyond that, I have gone to financial experts who have no self-interest in our city and no self-interest in the way government functions. And I have asked them, if this city carries this type of debt, what do I do? Because I don't know what to do. I don't know the right thing to do. I'm really stressed out about it. I see the debt and I see the harm, because if a natural disaster tore through here and ripped down every one of our public buildings that the city owns, the debt that we would have to incur to replace those and the interest on that debt, it would crush us. We couldn't function. We probably couldn't replace half the buildings we would need to. So, yeah, I want to give the citizens a tax break by 2 mills. Hell yes, I want to give a tax break to my citizens. But I also have the responsibility of taking care of this entire city, of its entire infrastructure. And the infrastructure is not Democrat, it is not Republican, it does not deal with party lines. It deals with people who can work together and make it function for the betterment of every citizen. So I'm aggravated at being pressured to reduce the mills. It's frustrating because I agree with that person's principles. I share their philosophy and I understand where they're coming from. But at the same time, I have to serve an entire community and make sure that that community can run. Do I think there are some overages? Yes. Do I think there are ways we can save money? Absolutely. And I have sat with Darren. I have pulled my hair out with Darren. He's been great to sit with someone who has opposing views and a very strong opinion about things, and we've shared those opinions. And the irony is we can set aside any bias and say, what do we do? How do we fix it? Because we're both sitting here paying for what other people's decisions were. He didn't make the decisions. I didn't make those decisions. But we both stepped into it, and now we have to come to a joint way to fix this. If we butt heads, we're never going to solve anything. And that's what has happened with previous councils, too. All they did was butt heads with who ran the city, and it became this competition rather than a joint venture to make any kind of resolution in this budget. I said last year, we had a grant for $100,000. I know what that was for. It was the marijuana grant. They couldn't guarantee that it was going to be given to us, and that was 1 mill. I remember that conversation. I remember being surprised that the city was worried that I'd push for 1 mill reduction over that $100,000, and I thought it was stupid. Well, I'm learning, right? There are ways to reduce. There is ways to save. But our primary concern is this debt. And when I was new last year, I didn't know about it. I'm still learning about it. I'm still trying to understand how to grasp the weight of all of it and the weight of doing the right thing every single time I make a vote or a decision. And it's not easy. And I would challenge anybody who wants to challenge me, run. Run and come sit up here. And you be put under this pressure and try to make these decisions. Because it's frustrating. But I can say this, in the time that I have been here, this group, we call each other, we work with each other, we have these discussions, we don't always agree. Kelly's a good friend of mine. Val is a good friend of mine. Dar is a friend of mine. Paul is a friend of mine. Noel is a friend of mine. We don't always vote the same way, and we are a group where we are not holding that against each other, and we're saying, okay, I see your perspective, teach me. Let me teach you mine. And can we come to a consensus? And if not, that's okay too. Because diversity is what makes it spin. It's what makes the world go round. But we do have the assessment values coming in. It will hit in 2020. That will affect our voters. And we are a smart group, and we may understand that better than most voters. The counter-argument to that, though, is when you get an assessment, you are allowed to protest that assessment. If you don't like what's been done, you can go fight it. We don't control that. We're not the county. And as a citizen, you have the right to go protest that amount. But we also have to recognize that not every citizen is intelligent enough to know that, or informed enough to know that they can go protest. So we have to weigh the effect of that with our knowledge, and how do we compensate for that? Is that our responsibility to compensate for? I don't know that it's our responsibility to compensate for that, because I don't have any citizens calling me or emailing me or begging me to reduce the mill levy because of the assessment, except for one. I have one person who's made that argument to me. I agree with Val. I agree with Kelly. This entire council, I can tell you, agrees that we need to put a line item that goes directly towards that debt. And it needs to be significant, and it needs to stay there and be meaningful. And it's not to be touched, but we can't necessarily put that wording in for future council. We can put it in for ourselves. I'll be here for another 2. Kelly will be here for another 2, hopefully. And we can make sure that we are the stewards of that. And I would be glad to be a steward of that. And it's important to be, because the faster we can get the debt paid down, the more significant a mill levy reduction we could make. I've spoken with the city manager. He's talked to all of us about this. It may seem laughable or ridiculous or absurd that we say 10 to 13 years. But within 10 to 13 years, we can drop the mills by 10. That leaves it at 6. That's pretty damn significant. But I can't promise anything. I can't promise a fire won't rage through here and that we would have to touch the funds. That's the difficulty of this position. I can't make any promises. I can only do my best. I worked to get the SIF fund taken back, and I didn't want that money of a meager $20,000 to just be reabsorbed by the city. I thought that would be great as a mill levy reduction, right? Except it's kind of embarrassing because it's a small amount, but it's your money, so it should come back to you. But the administrative cost alone of returning that amount outweighs the benefit. So I went to Darren and I said, I don't know what to do. I wouldn't have fought for the fund had I known city was just going to reabsorb it any which way they choose. And it's not city that chooses it. We help. We help decide. So Darren came up with an idea with me of how do we could reduce a fee for something. And we've talked about that fee. And I think that we will have a fee that we can reduce that will return the $20,000 to the people. So it may be small victories, and some people may think that that's stupid or insignificant, but this is a council and this is a city manager that are willing to work together. He didn't push back at me one time when I said that money belongs to the people. I know that council for nearly 15 years has been trying to get rid of that fund. And not one council was successful at doing it because nobody could agree with each other. Because everybody put their own self-interest first, or their own principles first. I have really strong limited government principles. Nobody up here will debate that. Nobody. But I also have really strong self-service principles as well. And I serve everyone. I serve the city employees. I serve my citizens. I serve this entire community as a whole. And the debt is harming us and will continue to harm us. And if I drop 2 mills now, there's never a guarantee that I could do any more than that because of this debt, because it is significant. And it is just like you having a home and you've got a mortgage and you've got a credit rating. It is the same thing. And if your credit rating is in the bucket and your debt is sky high, how are you ever going to get out of that? And how are you ever going to be financially fit? How are you ever going to go on vacation or do what you want to do? That's what we're looking at. We're never going to be able to give that vacation of a mill reduction because of the sins of our father, not because of this current city manager and not because of this current council. And it is something we will continually talk about, we have been talking about, and we're not ignoring it. We're not ignoring how we can best serve all of you and benefit you financially. I don't think there's a single council member that's sitting up here that doesn't want to do that. And that's all I have to say.
Good job, Hillary. Thank you.
Thank you.
For sharing.
And even though I haven't been identified as one of your friends, I will.
You're my friend.
Your wisdom is amazing. I agree with almost everything you said, and appreciate the thoughtfulness. Well said.
Thanks.
Thank you. Paul?
You better let Noel go. He's all wrapped up over here.
It's hard to follow Hillary, but yes, I have some comments to make, and that was very good. Thank you.
It was amazing.
That wrapped it all up for. I'll kind of take it at a different angle here. I got a lot of notes here, so I'm going to probably jump around, but our goal as a council is to save this community money, and how we do that, we have different opinions, but sometimes we come to the right way on how to do that. Right now, we have an opportunity, we have a windfall, and I've always preached that we should be looking 5, 10, 20 years out. You're going to hear me say that all the time because that's what our job really is, not to look at next week. So we have a windfall of money. We have a large. Let me just stick with my notes. I can't follow that. That was so good. So our debt is going to be paid off in 14 years. That's kind of the number that I saw there. How do we reduce that? But let me take a side note here. People keep saying that the government's growing, and that's the story I hear all the time. But I'm going to go back to, we haven't raised the taxes for the city, or the mill levies in 28 years. So the city has worked within the boundaries that it has been given. It hasn't asked for more money. And this debt that we have isn't caused by the council. It was voted by the people to put a memorial park there, to put the aquatic center. Well, not everybody. I'll just say
Not the park.
No, memorial was separate, right? But
It was COP.
the pool. So that debt was voted by the people. I also go back and say the taxes were increased because there was a vote to the people for the school. There was also a vote to the people for the ambulance. Council had nothing to do with that. So our job is to do the best we can with what we have. And we have an opportunity here to take this extra money over the next 5 years and reduce our debt by thousands of dollars. Darren said if we do a 5-year, it's $150,000. We would reduce our debt. So we talk about this point of reducing the mills now. It's kind of a feel-good, hey, I've reduced the mills, I've reduced someone's property tax by $30 a month. I mean, if you really go out and calculate it, how much you're going to save, it's literally, like for me, it would have been like $3 a month. For some of the businesses down the strip, anywhere from, I think I calculated one business, it was $5 a month. And another business was $400 a month because they're probably the biggest business in town. So to me, this really isn't an emergency that we're hearing certain people talk about. It's not really an emergency. So so I look at the city as a business. And what's our business? Our business is to make sure the community is safe, the community is secure, and we have the quality of life that our citizens want. That is our business. That's their business. That's our business. So it is a business. It is a business, and our business is made up of people, just like a private business is made up of people. So don't think the government is this strange anomaly that is just robots in the background. It's made up of people. And so when we talk about lowering wages, you're talking about people that have families. You're talking about people that have bills, that have houses, have mortgages, credit card debt. So it all ties in. So I can't imagine a CEO saying, hey, everybody here is not going to get a pay increase for 5 years. I think half the employees would quit. And so that's kind of the counter argument I'm hearing with the outside sources, that the employees are paid too much, so we should reduce the mills and then they would level off. That's not the way I see it. I see it as, our government, our city government is made up of people that have families and have, everything I've talked about. So reducing these mills is I said it last year, I think is just, God, what's the word I used? It was not.
Pick one.
Yeah, there's a lot of words. It's not a smart move, let's put it that way. We can take that money and we can, let's just backtrack here. So I did my research just like Hillary, and I went back to 2008. And I looked at the mill levies back in 2010. And the mill levy, the amount of money the city got back in 2010 was $1.828 million. And then it went down, it flatlined from, I think, 2012 to now. It flatlined around 1.7, 1.6, and then we have this huge jump. So it's almost a correction. And what you're not hearing from Val is that he's only talking about the people that had the increase. You're not hearing anybody who had a decrease. I had a decrease, and I'm not complaining. But I should be complaining because I probably was overpaying for the last 6 years. So think about that, the reverse, and the people that were underpaying for the last 6 years. Because if you look at one of the chart where it was going up 2.5% over the last 6 years. So I think I think reducing these mills is not a wise thing at this moment. I think we could take this money. I have some suggestions here.
Excuse me, no, I don't want to interrupt, except we're close to a break. How long do you have?
1 minute.
Thank you.
I've struggled with this, like Hillary. I've talked to everyone here, and really, how can we take this money and save money? You gotta. It's kind of interesting. Hillary mentioned about the 10,000. The 10,000 that we saved from the CIF went to a car wash to keep the salt and stuff off the vehicles. So it's going to a place where it's actually going to save money. So we're spending money to save money. It sounds weird, but it works. And so with this amount of money that we've gotten, we want to earmark it for sure. I would love to do a resolution if the council is okay with that. My resolution, and we can work with it, would be 1 mil per year into a line item. And after 5 years, if we continue at $123,000, it would be $615,000. Put that onto the debt and then continue for another 5 years with 1 mil, continue to make an extra payment. And I think that would put us saving $350,000 in our debt. But those are kind of really rough numbers. But if council is willing to do that, I mean, that is a huge cost savings to take the money we're getting. And like I said in the beginning, our goal here is to save the taxpayers' money. And we are all fiscal conservatives here. I'm sorry to inform Mayor Pro Tem Carr, but we are all fiscal conservatives here, and we want to save money. Sometimes on the outside looking in, you're going, what are we doing? Trust me, we're doing our due diligence, and we're trying to make sure that we spend the money in the places that make the government efficient. And I know that's an oxymoron, but we are very diligent in making sure that happens. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Paul?
Sure. You know, I actually agree with Noel here. Reduction in mill levies and the way he's looking at it, at least he's taking an approach looking at the citizens. We have a problem with debt. Council, I believe, made the vote to put it on the ballot so the citizens can make the choice to vote for a pool. I don't believe council gave that opportunity when it came to the park. Near $1 million in debt service a year is absolutely ridiculous for the city. A 10-year strategical plan that really was never followed, really was not a strategical plan that took the interest of capital projects, strategical planning for logistics and moving people around, calming of traffic, pedestrian safety, connectivity of trails, really worked out. The pool not only has it caused us great debt, and the project had to be reduced in size in order to bring it in at the monies as promised by the people, the 10.1 million plus the cash money that was in the city's coffers, and then the enterprise also helping develop infrastructure for getting water to it and everything else like that, is another story. But the pool actually functions in the red, and it's quite a bit of red. The park requires maintenance, and that requires money. Businesses, when it's said that the city has not asked for a raise in taxes, well, businesses collect taxes. They used to be paid or given a little compensation for doing such a service. There are no compensations. Instead, they are hit with higher fees for being businesses, licenses for putting out signs, and other things for events and things that they may be involved in. So they do bear a burden. Ambulance service has raised taxes. Okay, citizens voted for it. They brought their argument in. It went through. The school has raised our taxes by a penny. The citizens voted for that. Okay, they're doing good. The library is coming to pay off their debts, and they have a mill levy that helps them do that. The citizens pay for that. And when you start looking at the web on how this money is dispersed, it's quite complicated. And it's hard for people to sit and try to understand what's happening and what we're dealing with. It's a very serious problem. I, for one, am all for reducing mill levies at a sensible rate and also restricting funds that can be spent and put into an account that would at least give us some interest rates. It reminds me of other administrations. You know, elections do have consequences. I will throw that out. You got a governor chasing out our oil industry left and right, and he's not done. I guarantee you there will be focuses on other industries in Teller County that will feel the wrath of this administration. You have a federal government that can't even sit down and do the work of the people as they were sent to do in Washington, D.C. Transportation bills have not been passed. That affects us. The idea of a reliever route around Woodland Park is a pipe dream. It will cost an absorbent amount of money when you could have an alternative route, more of a country road. And we can do that and we can accomplish that. To hear a deviation between Woodland Park and Teller County, my God, I didn't know Woodland Park was somewhere else in Colorado other than in Teller County. Working together with our commissioners and other elected officials in the county could spread some light and maybe some problem solvents to what we face. Highway 67 is a complete disaster. For someone to tell me that CDOT will put a concrete barricade down the center and block off Research and Tamarack is absolutely ridiculous. I would not allow it, and I would be the first one out there telling them to jab me with the bulldozer, because it's absolutely ridiculous. It makes no sense, and for so many administrations to pass and so many budget periods to pass, and for it not to be followed by the city nor CDOT shows lack of interest, planning, ideas, forward thinking. I do believe our city manager has brought to this city some forward thinking, and I'll give him credit in the short period of time that he's been here, but the training wheels are off. We have to now come to an agreement and look for the future of our businesses, our people. There would not be a Woodland Park if there were not people in it. Take off the steeple and look at the people. That's just the way it goes. So we're doing the best we can. I'm doing the best I can to come to a conclusion. I like Noel's idea. I also like, unlike you, a lockbox that was invaded by our federal government on our Social Security was a terrible, terrible thing. And we can't go back, but we can learn from it. I agree with a designated fund, a designated capital improvement fund, designated fund for paying down our debt. And I don't want to take up no more time. I know we're running late, but we have a decision we have to make here. So I thank you for your patience and for being here.
Thank you, sir. Okay, a call for the question to approve Resolution 849.
I'll move to approve Resolution 849.
Second.
Suzanne?
Case,
Yes.
Labar,
Yes.
Levy,
Yes.
Nacarado,
Yes.
Sonier,
I'm not going to hesitate, no.
Sawyer,
Yes.
Carr.
No.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-2.
Okay, thank you all. Thanks for your patience. We're going to adjourn. I'm going to give you, how about 10 till 10? We'll get started. We still have quite a bit to go on the agenda. Thank you for your patience.
It needs to be an ordinance.
A line item on ordinance? We should ask Jason.
No, I already did. I did, that's why I came to that conclusion.
Let's do it.
Ain't nobody here. We could go home now.
If they're still open.
Okay, welcome back. Council, with your approval, if you look at your agenda, we have a public hearing on a liquor application. The gentleman's been waiting for 3 hours now. Do you all mind if we address 9A and then go back to ordinances on initial posting?
Not at all.
Is that okay?
Yes, please.
All right.
Sorry about
Then,
that.
if Chrissy is ready, because I didn't mention it to her, I'm sorry. For everyone's information, we will move to public hearings and 9A. And we may do B and C right after it, Laura. Okay.
QJ?
Move to approve.
Yeah. Okay, before Chrissy starts, council members use electronic devices to access the materials relevant to the public hearing before us. Be assured that it is the common practice of the City Council that these devices are not being used for texting, emailing, or other communications during the public hearing. Thank you, Chrissy.
Thank you. All right, tonight we have a public hearing for a transfer of a fermented malt beverage liquor license, which is for Colorado Jordan LLC, which is the Valero gas station over by the movie theater, located at 520 U.S. Highway 24. The applicant has a current sales tax license and EIN. They're eligible to apply for a license. The location is eligible to be licensed. It already is since it's a transfer. The owner is Colorado Jordan LLC. Possession of the property is documented by a lease through September 12th, 2020. The application was submitted on August 27th. It was posted on September 8th. The public notice was published in the Courier. Character of the applicant is not an issue for this hearing. Operation of this business is in compliance with local zoning, building, and fire regulations. All applicable fees have been paid, and following the public hearing, we recommend that you approve the license. And Shaddy is here currently if you have any questions for him.
Great. Young man, would you like to come forward?
Do you want to come up?
Would you like to come forward? I'm sorry. And just give us your name and address and give us about 30 seconds on what you're doing.
My name is Shadi Haddadin. I moved here to U.S. in 2016. I've been living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we moved here to Colorado. We saw this opportunity, and I'm happy to live here in Woodland Park, to raise my kids here. And we started our business, me and my wife. We're living in 1330 Firestone Drive, and we've been here in Woodland Park for 2 months now. And I'm trying to do everything like what you told me.
Like an American.
I'm sorry for my English.
We like
Welcome.
that. Council, do we have any questions for the applicant?
Welcome to Woodland Park.
Yeah, welcome to Woodland Park.
And best of luck to you for sure. Thank you.
You gonna be selling any of that good Portuguese wine over there?
No, it's just a fermented malt beverage license.
I just want them to know, being from Portugal, that it's a
called beer.
fermented beverage.
Okay, Council, if there's no other questions, 1 second. We just have to have public comment. Anybody like to speak on this issue from the audience? Okay, if not, then I'm sorry, Val, go right ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr.
No,
Mayor.
go right ahead.
Move to approve.
Second.
Liquor
And a
license.
second. Suzanne?
Thank you. Labar?
Yes.
Levy?
Yes.
Nacarado?
Yes.
Saunier?
Yes.
Sawyer?
Yes.
Carr?
Yes.
Case?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for
Thank
your
you. Good
patience
luck.
tonight. Thank you very
Have a
much.
good night.
Thank you.
Council, you want to stay at public hearings, do these two quickly and go back, or do you want to go back to ordinances on initial posting?
Are there people in the audience for the public hearings, Mr. Mayor?
I don't believe so.
Let's just go for it.
All right, then we will. Laura, I think you want to take these at the same time, and we'll vote on them separately.
Good evening, Mayor Levy and council members. Yes, let's take both of them together if possible. And I even have a little brief presentation.
Yes, sorry.
You
Okay. I don't need
take it.
I'm going to close your presentation. Thank you. Tonight, it is my pleasure to present to you two ordinances that the Board of Adjustment has worked diligently and hard on for the last 2 years.
Wow.
They are municipal code changes to Chapter 1851, which deals with the Board of Adjustment, to Chapter 1860, which deals with variances which are handled by the Board of Adjustment, to 1806-432, which deals with setbacks, and to 1813-040C, the UR Zone District side setback. So tonight we are considering two ordinances, Ordinance 1355, which deals with setbacks, and Ordinance 1356, which deals with various changes, mostly miscellaneous minor updates to sections that the Board of Adjustment deals with. So these images were included in the staff report that was presented to you, and what they indicate is that in 2018, the Board of Adjustment considered variances for the most number of cases that they have ever dealt with, and that would have been 11 variances since their implementation as a board in 1969. And the types of variances they were looking at were setback variances. They were for narrow lots in the urban residential zone district, and they were for setback variances of as much as a few inches. Very minor setbacks, encroachments. So, for instance, we have a lot on Willow Street that was constructed. It's only 50 feet wide. The applicant wanted to put a house in here. He has a 25-foot setback from this side because this is also a street here, Chester Avenue. And he has to meet an 8-foot setback here. And the building itself is not a mansion in any stretch, by any stretch of the imagination. It's only 18 feet wide. It's a single-family residence, and it has overhangs because it's a gable roof. So in order to fit this building, he had to come forward and apply for a variance. What we're seeing is this kind of development and these type of applications that are coming before the Board of Adjustment. And it's taking up their time, and they don't mind dealing with these, except that they want to reduce regulations and they want to make it easier for an applicant and a citizen and a resident who is building a house in the city of Woodland Park to build that house in a more efficient, effective, and quicker manner. So they want to reduce these types of variances from coming forward. And what we're talking about is a reduction only in the UR zone district, which is urban residential. It's only going to apply for lots that are 60 feet wide or less, like this one, which is only 50 feet wide. And it only will allow for an encroachment of an eave or a gutter, anything that encroaches as part of the overhang, by no more than 2 feet. So to give you an idea, here's a little thumbnail of the entire zoning map in the city of Woodland Park. The UR zone district, which is urban residential, is only the bright yellow lots that you see here. And you can even see the pattern of lot development. And you can see these really narrow lots that were platted in the late 1890s, early 1900s. Some of these lots are only 25 feet wide, typically 150 or 160 feet long. And so to develop in what I call a Victorian-era plat in the current century is very difficult. So that is why the Board of Adjustment felt that after 2018 and all the variances that they were dealing with, that it might be worthwhile to change the regulations related to encroachments. And again, very limited change in the regulation. So the Planning Commission did review the ordinances and the draft code, the code changes as drafted. They actually had 2 work sessions with the Board of Adjustment, so they were joint sessions with the Board of Adjustment and the Planning Commission. And this is after the Board of Adjustment had numerous work sessions within their own board to look at these regulatory changes. Anyway, the Planning Commission looked at it twice, and they had a public hearing on October 24th, 2019, and they did recommend that council approve both ordinances. I just realized I didn't even speak about the other ordinance. So Ordinance 1356 is just miscellaneous changes. The red lines that were in the staff report indicate the types of changes. A lot of it relate to changes where the Board of Adjustment in 1969 did much of the same things that the Planning Commission now has jurisdiction over. So there was overlaps. And so we're just cleaning up that language, clarifying some of that language, and that's what 1356 does. Again, all the red lines for both of these ordinances were in the staff report and clearly identify what's being deleted and what's being added. So again, Board of Adjustment supports these regulations in whole. Planning Commission recommends that council approve these 2 ordinances. And the staff would also suggest that the City Council approve and adopt Ordinance 1355 and 1356 in 2 different motions. At this time, I would like to acknowledge members from the Board of Adjustment that have sat through tonight's presentations up till tonight. So I'll get Catherine Nakai to stand up. She is an alternate member on our Board of Adjustment. And I'll have her come forward if she wants. She's one of the members that came in at the tail end of these municipal code revisions. She was involved with some of the Planning Commission work sessions, and she understands the types of variances that the Board of Adjustment has to deal with. So, Catherine, I don't know if you want to speak.
Catherine Nakai, 225 Morningstar Court. I don't have anything other than I think these are both extremely helpful in clearing up the verbiage, because it confused me when I was reading through the rules before I applied for this position. So that makes life easier. And from what I've done in my research, the variances on the UR seem to be a no-brainer to me to approve.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Council questions? Noel?
So there were some issues. I had a gentleman come to me about an easement that was a little short where for a driveway, and his truck would kind of sit a little bit in the road. So I want to get a crystal ball here, and I want to ask, were there any concerns with this in the Board of Adjustments? Did anybody have some concerns?
With
the
a
overhang.
truck that overhangs?
No,
onto-
the overhang. I'm just saying that I'm preferencing.
Okay. No, there were no concerns. And as a matter of fact, this emanated from the Board of Adjustment
Right.
because after dealing with inches, variances that deal with inches, it was somewhat ridiculous to have to spend the amount of time to talk about an overhang that really has no impact.
And it doesn't matter whether it's a two-story or a one-story building?
No, it only relates to side setbacks. It only relates to the urban residential zone district, so it's very limited. It doesn't matter if it's 2 stories or 1 story.
Okay.
Laura, what took us so long?
We had a busy year in 2019, and these regulations kept getting pushed back and back.
That's a good answer.
He said back.
I just have a simple question to understand how minute this might be. Under the current code, would something as simple as adding guttering to a facility that didn't have guttering ever before, could that have possibly caused them to have to come to Board of Adjustment for?
Yes.
Thank you. I assume so.
Anybody else? Laura, thanks very much. So, if we can, we'll do them one at a time. Approving Ordinance 1355. Is there anybody here for the public hearing? I'm sorry. Mr. Weaver, this is kind of right up your alley, no?
I like this.
I bet you do. Make things easier, right? Make things easier. Okay, if there's nothing else, thanks, Jason. Look for a motion to approve Ordinance 1355 to start.
Motion to approve Ordinance 1355 as written.
Second. Thank you. Suzanne.
Levy?
Yes.
Nacarado?
Yes.
Sonier?
Yes.
Sawyer?
Yes.
Carr?
Yes.
Case?
Yes.
Labar?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, and 1356.
Motion to approve ordinance 1356 as written.
Second.
And a second from Mayor Pro Tem Carr.
Thank you. Nacarado?
Yes.
Sonier?
Yes.
Sawyer?
Yes.
Carr?
Yes.
Case?
Yes.
Labar?
Yes.
Levy?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. All right, council, we will go back to 8A, and we've got 3 ordinances on initial posting, and Laura, you're back in action.
Thank you, Mayor Levy. This one will be very quick. It is my pleasure to introduce to you ordinance number 1361. It is an ordinance for a conditional use permit for a church use at 720 West US Highway 24. This is the old Brazen Head restaurant. Many of you will recognize that. It is a historically designated local landmark, and Victory Life Church is proposing to go in. Has gone to the Planning Commission, and tonight, again, it is just the introduction and first reading, and schedule the public hearing and second reading for December 5th.
Great. Council, we're on initial posting. Any questions?
If it wasn't so late, it would be really fun to have the history of that building and the old library behind it. But we'll do that another day.
We'll do it on December 5th.
It's a great
December
history.
5th. All right. If there's no questions, go. I'm sorry.
So, if they put a church here, this was a commercial business.
Yep.
This comes off of the comes off of the taxes.
Yep.
It's already been discussed with, I've had the same discussion already with Mark Salusta about it, and the assessor's office, they're aware, yeah.
And with the historical aspects of this building, what can they do, cannot do to this building? Changing it in any way?
I think that's
Councilmember Saunier, I would like to defer those types of questions to the public hearing on December 5th. Tonight, it's
Okay,
just
I'm
introduction. If you have any questions about the actual ordinance process.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Anybody else on the ordinance itself? Okay, if not,
I'll move to approve ordinance 1361 as presented and set the public hearing for December 5th.
thank you.
Second.
Second by Councilman Sawyer.
Sonier?
Yes.
Sawyer?
Yes.
Carr?
Yes.
Case?
Yes.
Labar?
Yes.
Levy?
Yes.
Nacarado?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so 1359 is administrative, and Emily, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor. So in your packet is the third supplemental. That's ordinance number 1359. And the purpose of this, again, is transparency. So you'll see the funds are listed that are affected by the supplemental. So general fund increased 59,500. Grants fund increased 17,800, which is also offset by $17,800 scholarship. Culture and recreation increased 48,548, which is offset by more than that, 49,840. Water utility fund is just a corrected amount, 8,450 for water shares.
Council, any questions? If there are no questions, then we'll call for motion to consider ordinance 1359 on initial posting.
So moved with the hearing for December 5th.
Thank you.
Second.
And a second. Suzanne?
Sawyer?
Yes.
Carr?
Yes.
Case?
Yes.
Labar?
Yes.
Levy?
Yes.
Nacarado?
Yes.
Sonier?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, Emily.
All right, so this is our 2020 budget. So ordinance number 1360, consider an initial posting and set the public hearing for December 5th. an ordinance appropriating sums of money to the various funds and the amounts and for the purpose as set forth below for the City of Woodland Park, Colorado for the 2020 budget year. And then the amounts are listed for each fund.
Great. Val?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. So we talked about moving some of the reserve money to $1 million per Councilman Member Sawyer's. I would like to see that adjustment before we get to our final public hearing. That will naturally reduce our reserve, but it's all reserve money. It's not going anywhere because we're going to designate it as restricted.
What's the process look like?
If I can, I would like to, based on some of that input, I'd like to come back with a proposal to city based on what has been said already, and find out the best way to go about doing that. And we can potentially modify this for the meeting on the 5th.
This is initial posting,
Yeah.
so I don't think it'll be a substantial difference in the ordinance.
The overall amount will be the same. It's just
Yeah.
about where it goes.
So
And we can,
we can
do
do a
that maybe
second
in a
read.
work session on December 5th?
Yeah, we can maybe,
Public
would that be, we
It
can bring it
won't
up.
take long.
Correct.
I think we all agree
Propo-
with it.
Yeah, with that understanding, I just wanted to make sure that we're covering that since
Yeah, absolutely.
And we talked about it
We're all on the same-
offline a little bit during the break. And
so we're not locked in with initial posting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Mr.
plan
City Attorney, are we
a work
good?
session
Amounts
just
will be the
prior to
same.
the next meeting and have it, and that works.
The appropriation ordinance is for expenditures. It doesn't appropriate for
revenues.
fund balance. So the appropriation ordinance that we're considering just appropriates expenditure.
Correct, and to your point, it can be amended all the way up till second reading. So if there's anything that needs to be changed at the meeting next time, that could be discussed, and if that's council's pleasure, it can be changed.
Thank you.
And I think it's time for us to do the right thing. We've talked about it for about 6 years while I've been on council, and so this is a great opportunity to give our future debt some serious reduction.
Absolutely. Get started.
Get started. We've been talking about it. Let's do it.
Sounds good, then I just
Thank
need
you.
a motion
Val.
to
I'll move to approve ordinance
1360.
1360 and set the public hearing for December 5th.
Second.
And a second, Suzanne.
Thank you. Carr.
Yes.
Case.
Yes.
Labar.
Yes.
Levy.
Yes.
Nacarado.
Yes.
Sonier.
Yes.
Sawyer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, we're going to move on to reports because there is no new business tonight. I only have a couple of announcements. First and foremost, for everybody and their families to have a happy Thanksgiving. I know some of you think like I do. It's my favorite holiday of the year, and I get to have family and friends, and it's just a great day. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody. The Saturday following, November 30th, from 9 to 4 is Mountain Artists Holiday Show. That's at the UPass Cultural Center. And then Thursday, December 5th, is the Chamber Lunch and Learn. It's the estate planning at the Ute Pass Cultural Center. And then a lot going on that weekend. I'll mention it quickly. There aren't many people left, but the 7th and 8th is Holiday Home Tour. Kelly, tell me when the other event is with the media.
Can I go through the whole list?
I wish you would. I'm done.
Okay.
I'll defer
just-
to you, and then we'll come back to Val.
Okay. The December 7th is really the kickoff of the holiday season in Woodland Park, and it begins with Breakfast with Santa, hosted by the Kiwanis, and that's from 8 to 11, I believe, at the Cultural Center, with Mr. and Mrs. Claus, with a full breakfast. And then all day long is the Tweeds Holiday Home Tour. It's our 21st annual Sounds of the Season, December 7th and 8th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can purchase tickets online at wphht.org or at Tweeds or at City Market. And at the same time that day is the 6 o'clock is the lighter side of Christmas parade on Highway 24 beginning at Taco Bell, 6 p.m. And culminating with, and during there, we have bum barrels, and people and the businesses are open, and it's really an awesome event. And then we have fireworks hosted by the City of Woodland Park that the people enjoy. And then something new this year is you will funnel up Center Street from Highway 24 to the Candy Cane Lane, inviting you into Memorial Park, where under the pavilion, both sides of the old fireplace there that was rebuilt will be lit with fire. Compliments of Tip Top Tree Service has donated wood for us to burn in the fireplace for warmth. We will have the Crazy Hat Contest in honor of Mike Williams. We will have the parade awards for the floats. And then we will have the mayor flip the switch for the tree lighting, which will be the two trees that grow together, made into one tree, at the corner of Center and Henrietta. Those two trees that go up there will be decorated for our community Christmas tree, and we're hoping Mr. Mayor will be there to flip that switch for us in celebration of the tree lighting and the start of the Christmas season. One more thing is the tour is on Sunday as well, same hours, 10 to 5, and then at 6 p.m. at the Cultural Center, the Wind Symphony will be playing their Christmas concert as well. So be sure and attend that as well. So it's a full weekend for the kickoff of Christmas in Woodland Park.
And the event, is it tomorrow night?
Which one? The gala. And that is an invitation to, we've invited our sponsors, our volunteers. It's really a celebration for all the people that volunteer and support the Holiday Home Tour to say thank you. And I'm sorry, but it's really invitation only because Tweeds only holds so many people.
That's true.
But you can be a sponsor or a friend of the tour and you get to come.
So describe the hat that won last year.
I have no idea.
You don't remember it?
No, I never went to the indoor thing. There were too many people.
That was, I have to say, go to the hat contest. It was amazing.
It's hilarious, I've heard.
I couldn't believe these hats actually could exist and be on someone's head. So if you have that opportunity, go watch it.
Well, since you're on board, why don't you, you're next. We'll go a little backwards. You got anything?
I have nothing. I'm sorry.
Paul?
I got something. I got something. In my hands, I got the key to car number 15, Cog Railroad. We loaded it up today. I've had a very busy week. I expect that you will assist us tomorrow when we bring the car into town. Yes. Today we would have brought it up, but the road conditions were not favorable. It is on the truck. The crane is coming. The car is coming. I've set a time for 8:30 to 9 o'clock to leave Manitou and be up here in about 45, 50 minutes. I'll be surveying the roads at 5 o'clock in the morning, making sure everything is set. And it's been a pleasure working with the Cog Railroad. It's been wonderful. The Broadmoor has allowed this car to come to us. And Saturday, we're going to have a celebration. Brass band, Santa Claus is showing up, cowboys and guns, the sun's coming out, free hot dogs. Please come join us from 12 to 2. Thank you.
Just a small reminder that the TMJ had a full page, actually almost a full spread of the history of the car. So if you can get that, read it. It's pretty good. It was Jim Jones who wrote it, and he's the
historian.
He's the historian behind the car. Yep. It was excellent. So if you can pick up TMJ, I think and then read that before Saturday, I think you'll appreciate that car even more. So.
Thank you. Darwin?
Yes. I had a full day of enjoying tours of the various city facilities yesterday, and I thought I'd say thank you to all of those who helped me out with that and spent time educating me. And I can see where some of the budget goes, most of it, as a matter of fact. tremendous facilities, tremendous folks, operations tremendous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dar. Hillary, my friend?
Yes, friend. You're never going to live that down.
I got nothing. I'm a unicorn.
There you go.
I never knew I was the mother hen.
Val?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple things. The first thing I just forgot. Let's see, what was it? No, I did. Second thing. So I want to thank former Councilmember Harvey for tremendous service, both here and in service to our country and for this town. She and I had some contentious moments. We have interestingly enough, we have similar principles, but we seem to find ourselves at odds because we're both very passionate and trying to help the city all the time. So I welcome the future when both of us are not sitting up here and we can have a drink at Vino and Notes, which is what we do about annually. But I want to really mention that she's been valuable to both the city and the nation's service, and I can't thank her enough. Tomorrow, we have some World War II vets in our town, and tomorrow I'm going to bury my dad in the National Cemetery, and there's not many World War II vets sitting around anymore. And my dad's been dead a while, but as you can see, I still miss him greatly. But when you see an old vet sitting out there, talk to him, find out. The World War II vets don't talk much. They really don't. My cousins in Vietnam don't talk much either. Korea, my uncle who was in Korea went up Pork Chop Hill and in Vietnam. Anyway, the various battles, they don't talk much. But they're out there, they're in need, and these World War II vets are not with us much anymore. But tomorrow I'm going to celebrate with my family and go down to Pikes Peak National Cemetery, and I'm very grateful for the U.S. spending money on a national cemetery in our area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, move on to City Attorney report.
Nothing to report other than my complete satisfaction with these microphones. Even if I struggle to get them to turn on. Thank you.
It's been a good show.
Okay, next, Darren.
Yeah, we can give a thanks. We got Ben in the back there, so Ben's is one to help to install them today. I appreciate it, Ben. They are quite a bit better than what we've had. I would like to kind of echo. I do want to echo what Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Carr said about Councilmember Harvey, and the one thing I remember, about Councilmember Harvey that sticks with me is. She was the first person to truly frustrate me here, and with I thought there was an easy decision by City Council to approve that parking lot discussion we had about 8 or 9 months ago. I believe it was 8, maybe it was less than that. It was first week there, and she didn't rubber stamp anything. I'll tell you that. She definitely pushed us. She had. Tell you, she was challenging, and I really appreciate what she did, but makes me not take anything for granted at all. A couple other things I want to chat about, or I want to pass my report off to. I want to allow Kip to talk about an update with Evergreen Heights for the community. Have Emily talk about the sales tax report, and then I'd like to pass the final portion off to Miles. As you know, the final verdict was read and sentencing occurred on the Kelsey Barrett case, and I'd like to have Miles talk about that as well. So start off with Kip.
Okay, real quick, pleased to report that the bottom mat in both the east and westbound lanes is finished. We're about 40% of the way through the flat work. We're anticipating the remaining 60% of the flat work being done by about the middle of December. Obviously, all weather dependent. And at this point in time, we'll probably be finishing the top lift come spring. We're trying to do this with no seams, 2 straight poles in each direction, so for a smoother ride. But we don't anticipate the weather to cooperate to get that top mat in, but we're holding our breath, if you will. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. So included in your packet is the tax revenue update for sales tax and lodging tax received in October for sales that were incurred in September. And we had 30 new business / sales tax licenses issued or reactivated in October. One thing it's interesting to see, it is normalizing a bit with the trend. So month to date this year, 2019 over last year, we had a 0.66% decrease. And so right now we're sitting at year to date, it's 4.65% increase, which I think last month the report was we were sitting at a little over 5%. So you'll see it's kind of normalizing a bit, but we're still, it's still looking good. And then lodging tax, a little bit less than it was over last year this time, but overall we're almost at 2% increase year to date.
Thank you, Emily. Questions for Finance Director? Okay, Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to start off again by thanking Council and our community for all their support during the Kelsey case. Monday was an amazing day for the closing arguments to happen, for the jury to go into deliberation, for them to come out with a guilty verdict, to then be sentenced, and then do a press release all in that short time frame. It really went a lot quicker than I anticipated it. And I just want to thank you again for your support, for the supplemental to help us do the case. For him to get a life without parole plus 156 years speaks to the quality of work that everybody did with this case. I know I frustrated the media by not getting a lot of interviews afterwards. I'm still getting pestered for interviews. I just want to remember Kelsey. I want people to remember Kelsey for how she lived, and not so much Patrick for what he did. So with that being said, tomorrow night we're going to be doing a small candlelight vigil in Memorial Park starting at about 6 o'clock. We've got a small program put together. It'll be over by the fireplace. We are going to have the fireplace going because it's going to be cold. And then Saturday afternoon about 2 o'clock at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we're going to be doing another memorial, or they're going to be doing a memorial for Kelsey, and just celebrating her for the person that she was, and giving a little bit of closure for her parents, Cheryl and Daryl, as they go into Thanksgiving with one empty chair at their table. So again, just thank you very much for all your support throughout this. It's been really trying. You lost a 30-year officers during this case, and it was no easy feat for us to get it done, but that's what we do here, and we do it together, and so thank you for all your help.
Thank you. Just to interject quickly, I always say, who's thanking who, right? The cooperation between you and your staff, the county, Sheriff's Department, CBI, FBI, everybody that was involved in that case is just a great example for all of us on the benefits of working together and having some real success. So it all starts at the top, and so just thankful for you, Miles, all your guys. Be sure and let them know, and gals, and everybody you run into that was part of that whole process, because as you just alluded to, it just couldn't have had a better ending for all of us. I know a bunch of us were a little bit nervous, right, because we've seen things in our past that haven't come out exactly right, but I feel like justice was served, and it all is because of you guys and your hard work and your willingness to work together. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'd like to, in addition to the PD, there were a lot of other elements of staff that helped in the process, including the Public Works Department. So I just, I'm really proud of all the work that the city did, and ultimately the outcome was really great. We can't be any better. Yeah.
Anything else, sir?
Nothing.
Council, anything else before we adjourn? Yes, ma'am.
A motion to move into executive session.
Oh, I didn't know we were going that direction.
Yeah, it's on here.
No, I know that.
Is Tanner still here?
No.
Could someone have his text or text let him know, right?
Text Tanner?
Since you're the DBA, we're ready to
Part
meet.
of the executive session.
We're going upstairs?
Yeah. He might need to make sure he can be here, but.
He went into bed, and then we can go into bed.
Okay. All right, we can go meet.
Okay, council, I need a motion to move into executive session.
So moved. Motion to move into executive session.
Thank you.
Second.
And second, excuse me, Suzanne.
Thank you. Mayor, can I just have you, for the record, read what the executive session is for? It's right on your agenda, the
I'll
very
be glad
last.
to. Pursuant to CRS Section 24-6-402, Sub 4, Sub E, Sub 1, for the purpose of developing strategies for negotiations and/or instructing negotiators concerning sale of city property.
Thank you. We'll take the vote now. Case?
Yes.
Labar?
Yes.
Levy?
Yes.
Nacarado?
Yes.
Saunier?
Yes.
Sawyer?
Yes.
Carr?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Wow, these are great.
10:33.